the Industrial Revolution of the Mage Lord. Greetings, fellow multiversal adventurers. It's an honor to have you back in this saga that has us all hooked. Official channel statement: this story is 100% epic fiction. So please don't attempt real magic, the results aren't guaranteed and insurance won't cover it. The rights to this masterpiece belong entirely to its brilliant original author. We are just a barge sharing it with you. Do you want to keep being part of this amazing community? Join our ninja army of subscribers on YouTube and give this content a like. And for true fans, our Patreon has exclusive ninjutsu waiting for you. Chapter 151: The Bara Genius. After successfully achieving his goal of anonymously joining the Union and convincing the legendary spellcaster, Mr. Scorching Lord, to share publicly the Union's collected magical literature and research findings on the forum, Harvey devoted his full attention and time to writing the code for the forum's magic encyclopedia. According to his verbal agreement with the Scorching Lord, Harvey would provide the technical development and production of this online magic library, while the selection and uploading of materials would be handled by members nominated by the Union. Furthermore, all points earned from paid browsing of the Union's magical knowledge would be shared with all Union members within the forum. Harvey considered these demands reasonable. After all, the foundation for building this magic encyclopedia came from the Union, and he didn't have the energy and time to manually compile and select a vast amount of academic literature, then manually transcribe and type it for uploading to the Spellcaster forum. I've heard that the Manipulator Hand, an upgraded version of the Mage's Hand developed by high-level spellcasters, can simultaneously manipulate multiple virtual magical arms to complete tasks like document transcription and experimental testing. I wonder if the high-level spellcasters assigned to this task by the Federation will be able to use this technique to complete such a massive and demanding workload. The Scorching Overlord specifically assured him that they wouldn't be releasing their entire collection of documents to the forum for public sharing anytime soon. After all, the chief had used his position and prestige to force this collaboration, despite immense pressure and skepticism from conservative factions within the Federation. Therefore, cutting-edge research and original magical knowledge couldn't be directly transferred to Harvey for the time being. Harvey readily expressed his understanding and agreement. One must eat one bite at a time, and outdated ideas and conservative practices can't be changed overnight. Once you all truly experience the joys of sharing and communicating through my magic encyclopedia, you'll naturally join this vast wave of internet knowledge sharing. Soon after Harvey completed the code development and launched the magic encyclopedia, 3 members of the Union, who had been on standby, quickly applied to join the Spellcaster forum. Harvey granted them editing and uploading privileges to the encyclopedia section. Considering the time constraints of content screening and manual uploading, he estimated that this new paid knowledge section would be officially open to forum members within a month. As for Harvey himself, he could access the fresh literature uploaded by these 3 dedicated high-level spellcasters daily on the Magic Network's servers. While most of the material currently consisted of general spell research and in-depth analyses of magical theory, it was still a significant benefit compared to the outdated material Harvey had learned at the Mage Academy, solidifying his previously acquired theoretical knowledge. For example, the Dictionary of Ancient Wizarding Spells and the Common Language of the Continent deeply intrigued Harvey, greatly aiding him in deciphering the ancient wizarding knowledge shared with him by Arstolan. Another ancient magical tome, the Book of Summonings and Fables, was also fully deciphered by a skilled spellcaster within the Union, who meticulously annotated the key points and reorganized it into documents suitable for modern spellcasters. While this content fell outside the realm of necromancer research, it significantly broadened Harvey's theoretical horizons. After all, necromancers are typically specialized wizards, limited by their own school of magic to focus on the study of death energy and soul and flesh magic. Harvey's research in necromancy focused on soul transfer and life transmutation, a goal he had pursued since his time at the Undead Academy. His dedication ultimately yielded results far superior to those of his predecessors. With the help of a time traveler's miraculous spiritual anchor, he successfully experimented with transferring the soul of a living being into an alchemical creation. I wonder if Professor Gavin, who slapped a thesis in my face, would be stunned if he knew about my current research results. Harvey thought of his thesis advisor, now a mid-level necromancer of the same rank as himself, and felt a sense of being in another world. He had only graduated from the Mage Academy 3 years earlier. Sir, please take a look at this research document. Sitting side by side with Harvey in the study, Arstolan, who also possessed a magic brain device, was using Harvey's secondary account, Kilthuzid, to assist Harvey in reviewing the newly uploaded Federation documents. As an ancient wizard and hybrid, Arslan possessed a far greater depth of magical theory and knowledge than Harvey. Therefore, he was specifically responsible for searching and organizing content that might be helpful to Harvey's research direction. Oh? Documents on soul research? I remember their recent uploads barely covered that area. Harvey stood up curiously and moved behind Arslan. It wasn't that the Union was deliberately hiding it, rather, magical texts dealing with soul research were incredibly rare. Most of them bordered on forbidden techniques, preventing them from even passing review and naturally falling outside the Union's target for inclusion. As Dallin murmured, I don't think this document strictly addresses a particular type of sorcery research, but rather, it's a very broad theoretical exposition, a completely new kind of theory I've never encountered before. I find it truly novel and intriguing. Harvey's curiosity was piqued. He quickly took the seat as Dallin had vacated and began to peruse this rather puzzling document with rapt attention. The document's straightforward and concise opening statement immediately captivated Harvey. I believe that the magic of ancient wizards stems primarily from imitation of other magical creatures, based on ignorant and clumsy exploration. Modern magical theory, while still based on the research of ancient wizards, has begun to explore the origins of magic and the laws of energy. Fortunately, we are truly beginning to understand the essence and principles of this world's extraordinary powers. What is the true nature of the extraordinary? Why are we able to discover the magic weave and draw from it an inexhaustible supply of magical energy? Where does the endless energy within the magic weave come from? How is it generated? Harvey felt a revelation when he saw these three seemingly abstract questions. The author who dared to raise these questions actually began to ponder a question that even Harvey, a time traveler, could not accurately answer. Does this world filled with extraordinary powers also obey the law of conservation of energy? Chapter 152 Unexpected Original Technique. In the theoretical knowledge we've been learning about the four fundamental elements of wind, fire, earth, and water. How exactly do they transform from pure magical energy within the magic weave into elemental structures? Are these four fundamental elements formed from even more microscopic, unknown elements? If so, what are they specifically? Harvey was deeply moved by the opening questions of this document. He believed that even if he read the entire article, he would never truly find the definitive answers to these questions. After all, these were the ultimate questions that even a time traveler couldn't answer. However, two key points particularly excited and puzzled Harvey. Does the supernatural world also adhere to the law of conservation of energy? Do the fundamental laws of magical elements correspond to scientific concepts at the macro and micro levels? In Harvey's view, the first question clearly touched upon relevant research directions related to the magic weave. By understanding the formation and operation of the magic weave, and how magical energy is generated within it, allowing spellcasters to continuously draw on it through meditation, these questions would naturally lead to exploring the energy nature of the magical world. The second question was relatively easier to understand. Harvey believed that the four elements of magic were indeed fundamental to the material world. He believed this was indeed questionable. At least, his past alchemical experiments had confirmed the existence of more microscopic elements within substances like metals, minerals, magical creatures, and plants, a fact that completely adhered to the laws of physics. However, beyond the four elements, the powerful techniques involving mental power, souls, arcane astrology, and spatial distortion prevented him from truly integrating the scientific knowledge he had learned in his previous life with the principles of reality into his research into otherworldly magic. Harvey took a deep breath, forced himself to calm down, and settled into a steady state of research, reading the short theoretical document from beginning to end. The four fundamental elements of magic, in this author's eyes, are described as closer to macroscopic forces, perhaps the true fundamental forces of this world, involving the transcendental, should be called gravity, electromagnetism, and mutual forces of corresponding strength, and the four elements are merely manifestations of their respective forces. As his thoughts deepened and extended, Harvey sat in a trance, entering a strange, semi-meditative state. This time, he wasn't guided directly into the magical web space, but was pulled directly into the dark space within the spiritual anchor, floating in the air, gazing at the azure planet at his anchor point. This time, the space he was in was no longer a void. Around him appeared a starry sky, as if it had been temporarily cut and spliced together. It was unusually bright in the inky blackness, and each star seemed like a strange, flickering point of light. An invisible thread extended from the star, connecting to the illusory projection of Harvey's mental power. Simultaneously, a slightly thicker thread extended from the blue planet he called his home, tightly connecting him to Harvey. This two-way connection between the starry sky and the planet allowed him to maintain a stable position within the void of space. Harvey's meditative state was remarkably stable. Upon noticing the changes within his mental anchor, he immediately entered a state of observation and research. Does the connection from the starry sky, and the connection from the planets, represent the pull between gravity and interaction? Could this phenomenon be due to the insights I've drawn from that theoretical article? Harvey couldn't help but mutter, gravity, strong and weak interactions, and electromagnetism, the four fundamental forces of science, can actually be linked to the magical world of mind and soul energy. It feels like a perfect marriage of science and metaphysics. No wonder even a great figure like Einstein lamented that science ends in theology. Harvey forced down his doubts and began to extend equally thin mental tentacles from his projection, slowly making contact with the abruptly embedded star in the void. Soon, Harvey's mental tentacles followed the invisible line connecting him to the illusory constellation. He randomly selected a bright star and gradually merged his mental power with it. Suddenly, he felt his mental tendrils, like a taut string, tugged violently by some force, trembling violently, and his own mental projection began to vibrate in unison. Harvey quickly detached several more mental tendrils, entwining them with the original tendril, stabilizing the one that was being pulled and trembling, its amplitude increasing and threatening to break. The star it was connected to suddenly erupted with a brighter starlight, gradually spreading this silvery white light to Harvey's extended mental tendrils, tinging them with the same brilliant silver. The trembling gradually ceased, and Harvey felt his mental projection tremble suddenly, then slowly begin to be pulled by the tentacles, floating towards the starry sky. Just as it was about to touch the starry sky, another equally strong pull came from behind. Harvey clearly felt the thick connecting line from his home planet holding him back, preventing him from being thrown directly into the strange sea of stars. Pulled by the intertwining forces, Harvey's mental projection began to slowly and steadily drift between the starry sky and the planets in a regular pattern. Why do I feel like a living satellite orbiting the Earth? Harvey wasn't alarmed at all, but rather amused by this bizarre phenomenon. The starry sky connected to his projection, which in turn was pulled and rotated by the planets. A silvery glow emanated from the stars in the sky, flowing along the connected mental tentacles and infecting his projection. Harvey felt his sea of consciousness and magic patterns gradually expand and fill, a steady stream of pure magic energy pouring into it, giving him a feeling of fullness even in his soul. He couldn't help but look up at the starry sky again, only to find that the light of the connected star had dimmed considerably, as if it had been drained of its energy by Harvey. With a thought, Harvey channeled the pure magic energy he had just absorbed back into the dimmed star through his mental tentacles. As expected, the star quickly brightened again, but something even more miraculous happened the next moment. The star, now radiating its brilliant light, suddenly emanated a burst of radioactive light, causing the illusory space within Harvey's grasp to vibrate violently. Harvey felt as if all his mental energy had been drained from him. He could no longer maintain the illusion, and reluctantly, he detached himself from his mental anchor, ending his meditation and returning to the real world. Opening his eyes, he found himself in his own study, whereas Dylan, Reiner, Igno, and the others lay scattered across the carpet in disarray. The room was in chaos, as if it had just experienced a catastrophic experimental accident. The tapestries adorning the walls were charred at the edges, the candles melted and dripped, and the magic brain instrument before him emitted a puff of smoke, appearing to have overheated and failed. Tiny sparks of electricity flickered and emanated from the metal bodies of the two alchemical beings. The worst hit was the hybrid elf, Igno. His thick, tangled hair stood on end, as if struck by lightning. He closed his eyes and fell into coma. Reiner, lying on the ground, suddenly trembled, and the alchemical inscriptions on his head and chest re-illuminated. Apparently, having been upgraded to a higher-end model, he was recovering much faster, rebooting at a speed far exceeding that of Asdalin. Harvey quickly crouched over, but he didn't dare touch the still sparking metal body. He anxiously inquired, "What happened in the study while I was meditating, my lord? Just now, while meditating, you suddenly unleashed an unknown, area of effect attack spell." "We had no time to dodge." Reiner's voice crackled with electricity, his tone strange and comical. Harvey sat down on the ground, staring blankly and muttering to himself, "I know now, In addition to gravity and strong and weak forces, the last force that I haven't discovered in the spiritual anchor just now, electromagnetic force, how it exists and manifests. As a genuine mid-level spellcaster, he unexpectedly created an electromagnetic force spell that is not based on the four elements at all and is different from the pure arcane magic power. Chapter 153 Harvey's Magnetic Storm Field. Harvey, inspired by a rather fanciful theoretical paper, accidentally unleashed electromagnetic energy within his spirit anchor, causing considerable damage to the castle's study and his three assistants. Fortunately, he had been meditating, unintentionally triggering the electromagnetic energy fluctuations rather than analyzing a spell model, unleashing the actual magic through the magic patterns. Otherwise, Igno, in his flesh and blood form, would have been killed instantly, and Reiner and Asdalan's alchemical cyborgs would have suffered devastating damage. After being induced to recover from the electrocution, Igno fled Harvey's castle in terror, deciding not to meet Harvey directly for the time being and to communicate using single-channel communication devices to avoid further repercussions from their lord's insane experiments. After recovering, Reiner and Asdalan inspected each other's alchemical cyborgs, replacing delicate components damaged by Harvey's electromagnetic energy. They then anxiously pleaded with Harvey not to attempt further dangerous spell analysis. Harvey naturally couldn't explain how a mid-level spellcaster like himself could create a unique spell entirely unrelated to the elements or arcane within his mental anchor. He could only feign exhaustion and lie down on the sofa in his study to rest briefly, allowing the two assistants who had been trying to monitor him to return to their respective posts. After they left, Harvey immediately jumped up from the sofa and returned to the only remaining intact magic brain device. He opened the magic encyclopedia page and flipped to the article at the end. The author, Julian Aziz. Officially registered with the Union, a mid-level arcane spellcaster, employed as a junior instructor at the Orland Royal School of Magic. Harvey was stunned to discover that the man wasn't a highly educated and insightful high-level spellcaster, but rather a mid-level wizard like himself. He didn't even hold a formal position in the Union, merely a registered member, and his main job was a mediocre junior instructor. This gentleman has made considerable contributions to the field of magical theory, but I've never seen any of his papers or signatures published in any of the Federation's bulletins. He seems to be an unsung genius in theoretical research. It was a shame he was far away in the wizarding kingdom of Orland, at the easternmost tip of the southern continent, thousands of miles away from Harvey's location. Otherwise, he would have immediately sent a letter inviting him to his territory for a face-to-face discussion. After regretfully leaving the Spellcaster Forum, Harvey decided to immediately begin his first ever research project, analyzing and refining his own creative magic. Because he had directly accessed the unique electromagnetic energy from the stars through his spiritual anchor through guided meditation, he only needed to reconnect with it mentally, sensing the energy transformation patterns and frequency fluctuations from the star, to clearly construct the basic model for this creative spell. Upon returning to the real world, Harvey immediately fetched pen and paper and, relying on his memory, drew the spell model directly on paper. He then refined the entire model based on his understanding of the energy's flow and operating rules. After re-entering the magic network, Harvey began to experiment with harnessing his mental energy within the magic patterns, formally drawing and engraving the complete model structure of the spell. Unfortunately, due to his lack of practical experience, Harvey's lack of mastery of mental power led to confusion in the fusion and connection of key nodes each time he drew the model. This resulted in 6 failures. Fortunately, the mental anchor provided a significant boost of mental energy, allowing Harvey to pause mid-process and take a potion of energy restoration before finally successfully drawing the spell inscription. As the final model line merged with an energy connection point, the 3-dimensional model of the entire spell matrix was completed. A spinning silver ring immediately formed on the previously empty spell ring within Harvey's magic pattern. Within the ring, countless nearly invisible particles moved at high speeds, flashing tiny flashes of lightning as they collided. Harvey opened his eyes, sat at his desk, raised one hand, and pressed it down sharply. A faint silver light flashed from his palm, an invisible electromagnetic energy wave spread outward from the center of his hand. With a crackling sound, the last magic brain instrument suddenly flashed with fire and smoke, becoming useless. The energy wave continued to spread outward, destroying all metal materials and objects in its path. Just as it was about to reach the study wall, Harvey suddenly clenched his palm and controlled the electromagnetic wave to stop. By directing the degree of conversion of magic energy, I can control the intensity and coverage of the electromagnetic energy. Harvey had a vague feeling that if he were to let go completely, pouring out all the magic energy stored in a magic pattern, the converted electromagnetic energy would likely cover the entire Lord's castle directly, and even saturate it in 3 dimensions. It's worthy of being a creative spell. Not only does it not require incantations to guide it, it also doesn't require the help of spellcasting materials, and it can freely control the intensity of the spell. The electromagnetic damage it causes is also a range attack. Harvey never thought that he could actually get inspiration from a theoretical document. As a mid-level spellcaster, he accidentally came up with a creative spell that only a legendary spellcaster could complete. It's impossible to observe its actual effectiveness for now, so we can only classify it as an offensive spell. I'll try the power of the spell again tomorrow when I go to the spell testing ground in the underground laboratory. Let's define it according to the highest intermediate 6-ring spell. Harvey rubbed his hands with satisfaction and said to himself, this creative spell that belongs only to me will be named Freud's Magnetic Storm Field. While feeling happy, Harvey suddenly remembered that according to the conventions and regulations of the Wizarding Kingdom and the Federation, any high-level spellcaster who has created his own exclusive spell, as long as he submits the results of the spell research and the corresponding paper, and then passes the unanimous review and approval of the 3 chiefs of the Supreme Council, can be awarded the honorary title of Legend. The 3 chief wizards of the Union were naturally renowned, powerful spellcasters who had long held the title of Legend. They were fully qualified and experienced to review and judge the original creations of other high-level spellcasters, determining whether they met the basic requirements of creative spells. They would conduct detailed evaluations of not only the structure of the spells, but also their power and auxiliary effects. If I submit the results of this creative spell to the Union, wouldn't it be very likely that I would become the only wizard in history to receive the title of Legend as a mid-level spellcaster? And a necromancer at that? This would likely cause an immediate uproar throughout the continent's magical community, and countless doubts and tests would immediately overwhelm Harvey. No. He couldn't submit this spell paper under his real identity. Doing so would expose him to immeasurable danger and exposure, especially since his pioneering territory was still in its early stages of development. Harvey immediately and decisively decided to conceal the results of his creative research. He would later upload it anonymously to the Magic Encyclopedia on the Spellcaster Forum, allowing several Union leaders to review and critique his creation online without knowing his true identity. After all, as a spellcaster himself, Harvey was deeply concerned about his original creation's power, its rank, and whether it would qualify him for the legendary title that all magicians covet. Chapter 154 Alchemy in the New Era, Part 1. A Quinn walked into his independent alchemy workshop. Apprentices and alchemists paused their work, bowing their heads and touching their chests in greeting. Chief, greetings, master, he waved his hand casually. Don't worry about me, get on with your work. Frey's alchemy workshop, founded by him and Ed with the help of their family connections and personal funds, was a private enterprise, both nominally and in reality, owned by the brothers. Therefore, the alchemy workshop didn't routinely accept alchemy orders from the Union or the Wizarding Kingdom. Instead, it specialized in custom-made, expensive alchemical products for secular nobles. For example, the alchemical crossbow, which could be mounted on the walls of a lord's castle, could be operated by a single magic apprentice. Infused with magical energy, it could instantly unleash dozens of arrows, making it a powerful weapon highly sought after by lords and nobles across the southern border. Outside the alchemy workshop was a material sorting room, where magical materials and alchemical minerals brought to Alea from all over were sorted, screened, and cleaned. Nearly 100 alchemy apprentices trained by the Quinn family perform basic tasks here. They typically spend 5 to 8 years apprenticing, mastering the identification and processing of various alchemical materials. Only then are they promoted to apprentice alchemists and begin their formal alchemy training. Some of these exceptionally talented apprentices are directly selected by the Quinn brothers as their chief apprentices, allowing them to study alchemy under them. These fortunate individuals are rare, a rare opportunity, essentially a step up to heaven. Offley passed through the material sorting room, then slowly skirted the storage area before entering the alchemy workshop's core work area, the refining room. Pushing open the refining room's heavy wooden door, coated with a fire-retardant solvent, the view suddenly opened up. Several massive monolithic stone pillars formed the foundation of this vast room. The 4 stone walls were inscribed with unique alchemical inscriptions for reinforcement, intended to prevent an explosion or fire in the refining room from completely destroying it and spreading to other areas of the workshop. The roof was constructed of special magical crystal panels, attached to the skylight in transoms to allow daylight into the room, filling it with abundant light. A long row of metal lab tables was piled high with a variety of alchemical instruments, crystal bottles, glasses, small metal scales, crucibles, grinders. Each official alchemist was responsible for a single refining step, proceeding methodically. Compared to the Quest Society's alchemical weapon workshop, perpetually filled with a pungent odor of preparing dragon flame powder and the occasional explosion caused by mishandling, Offred preferred his own independent workshop, with its simplicity, order, and cleanliness. This was the essence of alchemy, the orderly fusion of various ingredients, heating, distillation, infusion, and refinement. The resulting results were endlessly varied and captivating. In this transition from chaos to order, finding a clear experimental direction, following a defined process to complete the idea, and ultimately achieving the desired, accurate results, this was a rare alchemical formula. Those who could improve upon existing alchemical formulas were considered full alchemists, but only those who could create their own original formulas qualified for advancement to the higher ranks. To date, Offred and Ed had created over a dozen, earning them promotions to the 12 chiefs of the Alchemical Quest Society. Offred casually summoned several family alchemists, gently inquiring about their progress and offering business-like encouragement. Glancing around, he spotted one of his disciples frantically at a corner alchemical lab, performing an experiment seemingly unlike the others. "Chris, what are you tinkering with? Why aren't you joining the others in crafting the workshop's orders?" Offred frowned and grumbled in a low voice. Chris, a young alchemist who looked to be in his early 20s, quickly bowed to his mentor. "Master, my portion of the process has been completed ahead of schedule, so I'm conducting other alchemical experiments in my spare time." Offred glanced at the materials scattered cluttering the lab table and asked irritably, "You're going to create some useless contraption again? These ordinary materials don't possess any magical properties. Even if you try to manipulate them, they won't produce any alchemical reactions." Chris had been an apprentice he'd taken on a few years ago and was now the youngest full-fledged alchemist in the workshop. Offred admired Chris's focus and talent and, from the beginning, carefully nurtured him, bringing him along to watch and learn more. But Offred's mind wandered too much, often coming up with wild ideas, completely ignoring the theoretical knowledge he'd taught him and the step-by-step process of advancement. Last year, he somehow managed to procure some expensive soaps, bath products reserved for aristocrats and wealthy merchants, quite popular among the upper classes. It was said to be manufactured in Orland, and the formula was a strictly confidential secret. After Chris obtained the finished product, he quickly cracked the soap formula, which presented no challenge at all, and happily reported his findings to Offred. However, Offred didn't praise him, instead sternly admonishing him against indulging in these folk alchemical gimmicks. Chris smiled and handed his mentor a small crystal bottle filled with light golden liquid. "Mentor, this is the inspiration I got from the making of that soap formula." Offred frowned and unscrewed the cork, then sniffed it from the bottle mouth. A fresh and not pungent fragrance rushed into his nose. "Isn't this perfume? The favorite of those noble ladies and wealthy wives? A small bottle can be sold at a high price of several gold pounds. The formula for making perfume has been around for a long time. It is made by distilling and extracting the essential oils rich in fragrant plants and mixing them with pure water. It is an ordinary alchemical product with an extremely simple production process, and there is nothing special about it." Offred rolled his eyes and was too lazy to get angry at his disciple. "Chris, this thing has already been invented by those low-end alchemy workshops. Is it worth your time and energy to think about it again?" But Chris explained with a smile, "Teacher, don't you find that there is something special about this bottle of perfume I made? I added materials rich in magical substances to it. Well, they were originally magical plants used to nourish the soul and restore mental strength. After mixing them into ordinary perfumes, they can soothe emotions, relieve anxiety and anger." He pointed to the bottle that Offred had just sniffed, and added in a low voice, "If it were any other time, you would usually yell at me and give me a serious scolding, but after you sniffed this bottle of perfume, you can still keep a calm attitude and didn't get angry at me directly. It is enough to prove its effect." Offred was holding the bottle in his hand and was stunned on the spot. Chapter 155 Alchemy in the New Era, Part 2. adding magical ingredients to alchemical products intended for civilians, offered asked in disbelief, his eyes wide. How dare you? Don't you know it's forbidden? His roar caused the other alchemists in the refining room to look up in bewilderment. Offered quickly unscrewed the crystal bottle, leaned in, and took a deep breath. The delicate, fragrant aroma instantly soothed him, and the rage in his chest was instantly extinguished like a cool, refreshing rain. Tell me the truth. You didn't let the formula for this potion perfume spread, did you? Chris, startled, replied, Of course not, Master. I just successfully concocted it 3 days ago. Besides, I don't intend for this to be used by ordinary people. I believe its true value lies in improving the quality of life for spellcasters and alchemists. Offered was speechless. Selling perfume to those staid spellcasters who subsist on water and bread all day? Making them fall in love with the aristocratic habit of applying makeup? It's sheer fantasy, he admonished Chris again, telling him to focus on crafting the alchemical armor custom made for a certain duke's bloodline knights. Then, unnoticed, he slipped a bottle of magical perfume into his pocket and slowly left the refining room. By the time Offord had finished inspecting the family alchemy workshop and sorting out some difficult material procurement matters, he returned home. It was already completely dark, and his twin brother, Ed, had returned home almost at the same time. The two brothers rarely focused on a single task simultaneously, always splitting up their efforts to ensure efficiency. When one was handling official matters with the Federation or the Quest Society, the other would focus on the family's internal operations. After a quick dinner, the two brothers tacitly entered the private alchemy laboratory together to begin the only research task of the day requiring their collaboration. Today in the family workshop, Chris gave me a little surprise. Offord pulled a small crystal bottle of magical perfume from his pocket and handed it to Ed. Ed's sense of smell, transformed by a special magical ritual, was obviously much sharper than his brother's. He unscrewed the bottle, took a close sniff, and laughed. Haha, that kid is doing this useless stuff again, mixing the extract from the bulb of a soul-condensing flower with the essence squeezed from ordinary petals. It can't be taken as an energy potion, and it violates the regulations of the Federation. No magical substances can be added to alchemical items made for civilians. He said this thing is specially designed for spellcasters and alchemists to improve their quality of life. Afri snorted coldly. What a whimsical guy. Ed was not angry. Instead, he sighed with emotion. Chris's audacious personality and wild ideas made him the most suitable person for intensive training and later joining our Life Alchemy Experiment project. Unfortunately, Alice, his interest is always in tinkering with these useless prank products. Staring at the exquisite crystal vial, Offord whispered, the other alchemists in the family workshop have complained to me directly more than once about Chris wasting precious magical materials on his private alchemical experiments. You know, the refining room can only accommodate 12 official alchemists, and those old members of the family have long wanted to squeeze their own juniors in. Transferring him to the official workshop of the Exploration Society? Sooner or later, he'll get into trouble. I'm afraid he won't even be able to keep his alchemist robes. The two sighed in unison, then let the topic slip and returned to their daily routine experiments. Offord remembered that he had been looking for information on trading a rare magical material on the Spellcaster forum. He wondered if anyone had responded in the past day. He immediately sat down at the magic brain device, logged into his forum account, clicked on the information exchange section, and began to browse. How could it be so easy to find active magical materials from sub-dragon creatures? Ed put down his work and muttered behind Offord. It's a luxury, you know. Dragons have been extinct for 400 or 500 years. Magical creatures with dragon blood are rarer than even legendary spellcasters in the southern continent. The last magical creature discovered to possess dragon blood was a giant dragon rhino from Isengard, the kingdom of the cavalry. It had been hunted down by high-level spellcasters dispatched by the Union, and its remains were stored in the treasury of the Sky Realm. The available active magical materials from the corpse had likely been divided up and consumed by the Union itself. Offord himself hadn't held out much hope in seeking such materials on the Spellcaster forum. His experiments with Lifeforged had repeatedly failed, stalling at crucial research milestones. This forced him to rely on finding even rarer materials and seeking breakthroughs through external aid. Suddenly, he saw a familiar member code name flash on the crystal panel. Someone had proactively responded to his request for materials. It was Mr. Kilthuzid, the independent alchemist whom he and Ed admired greatly. They had recently joined him on a Leline traveling expedition. Unfortunately, although they had found the lair of the rainbow dragon, they only harvested a small amount of bone powder from the skeleton of a long-dead dragon. This material possessed no active magical properties and was completely useless for their experiments. Kilthuzid, hello, you two. Mr. Mirrorman. I saw your request for a purchase on the forum. Kilthuzid was one of the few people who knew the Mirrormen, the twin alchemists, under the codename Mirrormen. However, they had a good relationship and didn't have to worry about their identities being exposed and causing unnecessary trouble. This independent alchemist had received much unpaid help from the Quinn brothers and had always spoken up for them on the forum, making him one of the friendly members of their small group. Mirrormen, long time no see, Mr. Kilthuzid. Do you have the magical materials I need? The Quinn brothers believed that the other party was merely an independent high-level alchemist with rather difficult circumstances, unlikely to possess such a rare, private collection of worm-type active magical materials. At most, he might have access to some secret information channels, which would be of great help to them. Man in the mirror, if you can provide information and channels for obtaining such materials, we are willing to pay you a certain amount of points or other compensation as a token of our gratitude. Kilthuzid, I'd like to inquire whether the worm-type active magical materials you require can be substituted with materials from other ancient species. Haha, that's just my speculation. After all, different ancient species possess slightly different magical properties. The Quinn brothers exchanged a surprised glance, somewhat incredulous. Could it be that, besides worm-type, he could also obtain active materials from giants, ancient high elves, or abyssal sea beasts? Those creatures are probably even rarer than worm types, aren't they? Man in the mirror, if special refining and fusion methods are used, it is indeed possible to replace worm-type active materials, but I'm sorry, let me be frank. Active materials from other native ancient species are probably even rarer than worm types, aren't they? Can you possibly obtain these materials? Kilthuzid, I do possess a portion of concentrated blood from an ancient high-ranking vampire, one that has not lost its biological activity, but the quantity is extremely small. It comes from my family heritage. I wonder if you are interested in trading it? If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156 Blast Furnace Steel Making. Between the vast farms and the mines to the southwest of the territory, a newly constructed complex of workshops bustled with activity. Carts of iron ore, hauled from the mines by camels, formed towering mounds in the open air ore stockpiles. Metal cranes then transported them to the iron foundry, where they were smelted into finished iron ingots. As iron ore output from the mines within the territory became increasingly stable, Harvey relocated many of the production plants, previously located in the core area, to a peripheral area, away from the market and residential areas, officially designating it an industrial zone. After all, the former iron foundries and civilian ironworks operated on a three-shift system, emitting a cacophony of production noise throughout the day. Plumes of acrid smelting slag filled the air above the territory, severely impacting Harvey's daily routine and the air quality within. With a decisive wave of his hand, he instructed Reiner to direct the construction department to relocate all production units, except the magical arsenal, to the outskirts of the territory, away from his castle and the municipality. The site of the demolished units was then allocated to Igno, who began constructing his potion garden. The remaining scattered plots of land allowed the nature-based spellcaster to quickly plant a large number of air-purifying trees and shrubs, transforming the former polluting factories into exquisite gardens. Replace the cooling water for the alchemical beast. Have it continue to blow air into the furnace. A supervisor in the iron foundry, responsible for smelting iron ore, shouted to the workers. Beside the cement brick furnace, a massive alchemical beast lay crouched on the ground, its huge black maw pointed at the furnace mouth, and it continuously moved its hide-sewn belly, blasting air into the furnace. Several skilled workers, carrying buckets of ice water, rapidly cooled by the frozen magic stone, poured it into the alchemy beast through the water inlet on its back. They then pulled a lever on its flank to expel excess high-temperature steam from its tail. Though unable to see what was happening inside the furnace, the workers continued to add charcoal. Their faces flushed red from the intense heat, and their light gray uniforms kept getting wet and dry, leaving a large patch of white, crystallized sweat. Boss. The iron ores melting. I see the molten iron bubbling in the furnace. A worker stood atop the furnace, specifically responsible for monitoring the situation inside and reporting to his supervisor. Quick! Open the slag drain at the bottom. Several workers guarding the furnace immediately used long iron hooks to pull open the iron grill at the back, allowing the slag, which had flowed into a designated groove, to flow out through the drain. This slag waste couldn't be discarded. It still needed to be flushed and cooled, then hauled by camels to the stockpile yard. Naturally, the Ministry of Construction would arrange for its transportation. They claimed it was excellent material for paving roads and foundations. The workers in the iron foundry privately nicknamed the dusty workers at the Ministry of Construction grey donkeys, whether it was cement powder from the cement factory, finely crushed slag from the iron foundry, or even riverbank sand excavated from the dock construction site, they accepted it all, as if any ash was a treasure. Under the supervisor's direction, the workers intermittently opened the slag spout several times. The worker in charge of observation reported that the molten iron in the furnace had all settled to the bottom, accumulating into a dedicated groove. They only needed to open the tap hole to allow the molten iron to flow out, where it would cool in a specially designed cast iron mold, yielding freshly baked iron ingots. The factory supervisor wiped the greasy sweat from his face. His early shift had already met his production target. All right. Everyone, shut down the alchemy beasts and cool them down. Follow safety procedures, and be careful of the high-temperature steam. Also, change into clean work clothes and wash your dirty faces. I've been notified that the grey donkeys from the Ministry of Construction may be surveying the industrial zone this afternoon. Don't show up looking dirty and bring shame to our ministry. Harry was the luckiest and most resourceful of the first group of wasteland refugees to join the territory. Although he had a leg broken during his enslavement by the evil orcs, his stonemasonry skills helped him survive. He wasn't slaughtered by the evil orcs as long-legged food, but stayed with them, helping them set up camp and dig stoves. After being rescued by Lord Pierce, he joined Lord Harvey's territory and quickly completed basic literacy training under Mr. Asdalin, becoming the first wasteland refugee in the territory to be able to read and write fluently. The past year or so spent in the territory had been 100 times happier than the previous 30 years of his life combined. Lord Harvey had granted him the opportunity to earn food and a salary through his labor, allowing Harry to finally secure his own two-story house after completing the first batch of buildings. Furthermore, his skill as a stonemason had earned him a position at the municipal government, where he became a territorial official with a fixed monthly salary and generous allowances, and was even in charge of the construction department. Naturally, he was deeply grateful to the Lord and diligently continued his construction work within the territory, ensuring quality and quantity. With a constant influx of residents and technicians from the construction department, he piece by piece built a pioneer territory into its present state. The Lord's Castle, the community, the municipal building, the convenience market. When the towering walls, stretching dozens of miles around the territory, were officially completed, the Lord personally pinned an exquisite black iron badge on his chest, patting him on the shoulder and praising him as a cornerstone of the pioneer territory and an outstanding pioneer in its development. The crowd standing on the newly built city wall applauded and cheered him enthusiastically. Lord Harvey smiled and supported him as he nearly collapsed from tears. This scene would remain unforgettable for him. Later, the territory's city hall awarded him an apartment, freeing him from the need to save for the purchase of a rental property. After 15 years of service, he could rest in his own home without work, and still receive a generous monthly stipend. Lord Reiner said it was a pension, and it would last until his death. This luxurious treatment was no different from entering the Heaven's Kingdom. Minister? Minister, a deputy beside him gently tugged at Harry's sleeve, interrupting his rosy vision of retirement and bringing his attention back to the real world. Indeed, the Lord had given him a new construction project, but it required him to collaborate with the Ministry of Industry to complete it. He carefully held up the architectural drawings the Lord had handed him, which depicted a towering tower. The tower's height was marked, nearly 7 meters, several times taller than the furnaces he had previously built for the Ministry of Industry. It was narrow at the top and wide at the bottom, with a minimum internal diameter of 2.5 meters. Without cement concrete bricks, it would easily collapse, necessitating a cast iron support system at the base connecting the tower to the foundation. A circular vent at the base, designed to allow alchemical beasts to blow air into the tower, was also included. There were also blueprints for the tower's accompanying facilities, an ore transport system powered by alchemical beasts, an iron ore transport line with rails and specialized ore carts. This tower, no, it's a furnace tower. Harry flipped to the end of the blueprints and saw the title, written in the Lord's own handwriting, Steel-making blast furnace design. His mission was to construct 6 of these magnificent furnace towers in the industrial zone, along with all the necessary supporting equipment. This is a test from our Lord. Harry rolled up the blueprints and waved his fists at his men. Let's go. Let's go to the industrial zone and survey the construction site. Let's show those stokers from the Ministry of Industry what we can do. Chapter 157 Selling Blood in Exchange. When Chris Bird, the young family alchemist, was summoned to his home by his twin mentors, a sense of foreboding washed over him. Since being singled out from among the other alchemy apprentices by mentor Offley 6 years ago and taken under his wing to begin formal alchemy training, he had yet to create a single, truly improved formula worthy of the Quest Council's approval. Whether it was enchanting alchemical prostheses and weapons, or brewing potions to enhance the powers of spellcasters and bloodline knights, Chris possessed no technical or operational proficiency, but he wasn't interested. He once attempted to transform alchemical bombs filled with corrosive acid into alchemical fireworks that could illuminate the sky in broad daylight. He also personally fitted disabled stray animals with alchemical prosthetics, hoping to give them a new lease on life. Unfortunately, the reaction between his flesh and blood and the alchemical creations was too intense, and none of the modified animals survived. He had secretly conducted some alchemical experiments in the past that violated the Federation's prohibitions, but thankfully, they were not particularly harmful and were covered up by his instructors. However, this recent incident of adding magical substances to everyday civilian items seemed to have particularly concerned Instructor Offord. It seemed that he had been summoned here today as a punishment. Instructor Offord, Instructor Ed, I'm here. Chris greeted the two teachers cautiously, suppressing his inner uneasiness. Offrey's tone was unusually gentle, and there was no sign of anything unusual. Chris, come here. Ed even stood up directly and pressed the young student to sit on the sofa opposite them, grinning. Why are you so cowardly? We won't eat you. Chris twisted his butt on the soft sofa cushion twice before he asked hesitantly, Teacher, is it because of the alchemical perfume I mentioned a few days ago? Offrey shook his head and smiled. Of course not. I called you here today to discuss something with you. Something that concerns your future and power. Ed went straight to the point. Chris, if you have the opportunity to have an alchemical laboratory that belongs entirely to you, and this laboratory is equipped with the most complete facilities and equipment, and there are corresponding alchemical workshops to guarantee mass production, what do you think? Chris was stunned and asked in disbelief. Me? Alchemical laboratory? And a special workshop to support it? Teacher, have you been drinking today? What nonsense are you talking about? Overy released the wizard's hand through the air, and dealt a moderate blow to the head of the student who spoke without thinking, and said in feigned anger, I think you are talking nonsense. We are serious, and this alchemy laboratory that belongs to you alone allows you to carry out any experimental ideas you want to realize without any scruples, without worrying about violations and taboos. He looked at Ed and decided to throw out all the conditions directly. An independent alchemist who has a good relationship with us, Mr. High-Level Alchemist, wants to find a formal alchemist who can work closely with him and serve a big shot behind him, and this big shot, although his identity is kept secret for the time being, it is certain that he owns a large territory that belongs to him. He wants to build an alchemy laboratory in the territory. So he contacted us and asked us to help recommend a newly built alchemy laboratory with the most advanced alchemy equipment and supporting workshops. Chris repeated in a muttered voice, it will allow me to take full responsibility and complete the experiments to my heart's content without any restrictions. He stood up suddenly, waved his fist excitedly, and said impatiently, Teacher, I do. I am willing to cooperate with that alchemist and work for that big shot. Ed smiled bitterly and pushed the emotional Chris back onto the sofa, handing him a magic contract. Excellent conditions and generous compensation always come at a price. If they officially hire you, you'll need to sign a confidentiality-level magical contract, requiring you to work for them for 5 years without pay. During this period, all experimental content and the identity of the person involved must be kept completely confidential and not disclosed in the slightest. Offord added, I can assure you that their attitude is absolutely benevolent and will not pose a threat to your personal safety. However, this unpaid work will not be short-term, and ownership of all experimental results and formulas will revert to that important figure. Consider this. Chris quickly scanned the contract and discovered that while it would be 5 years of unpaid work, the other party would provide him with housing and all necessary living expenses commensurate with his status. If he achieved breakthrough experimental progress, he would receive a reward, depending on the circumstances. These terms were even more generous than those at the Quinn family's alchemy workshop. As for the absolute confidentiality agreement and ownership of experimental results, Chris completely accepted it as a given. All his current work and research formulas were completely out of his control. Ownership was firmly in the family's hands, and he had no authority to freely conduct experimental projects. I agree to all the terms of the contract. Mentor, where's this great man's laboratory located? When can I set out? Don't worry, calm down. The exact location is confidential. If you choose to sign the contract, you can set out for Dallas in 3 days with a group of apprentices I have selected for you. There will be someone specifically responsible for receiving you. They will arrange your eventual arrival at the great man's territory. Watching Chris excitedly leave, clutching the contract, the Quinn brothers exchanged a sigh of relief. So we're selling Chris, just for a concentrated blood of an ancient high-level vampire. Free felt his conscience gnawing at him. Ed scratched his head awkwardly, as if comforting his brother, or perhaps himself. It's not like selling Chris out, is it? After all, an alchemy laboratory of his own has always been his greatest dream. He can finally pursue his wildly imaginative experiments without any constraints or restrictions. Mr. Kilthuzid's terms of the deal were a full-fledged alchemist, personally trained by the Quinn brothers and possessing solid theoretical and practical experience, and 15 alchemy apprentices, no older than 20, with some experience. All of them were required to sign a magical confidentiality contract, restricting their personal freedom to a certain degree during the contracted working hours. However, their safety and daily needs would be fully guaranteed. The sponsor of Mr. Kilthuzid's alchemical experiments, that mysterious figure has great ambitions, Ed speculated. I suspect this independent alchemist's current research, similar to ours, was also directed by that figure. Experiments in the art of animating inanimate objects were beyond the means and financial resources of even the most powerful lords, nobles, or even the royal families of smaller, secular kingdoms. I just hope Chris doesn't get ruthlessly returned by the other party just because he's so incompetent. Chapter 158 The demonic trace appears. Vaughn, his long legs sprinting at high speed through the dense, primeval forest, riddled with natural obstacles. After activating his bloodline talent, the long marches that once seemed excruciating to him now felt as effortless as a leisurely after-dinner stroll. A rush of footsteps echoed behind him, and without turning back, he knew Dave and Wayne were desperately pursuing him. Looking up, he saw a wide ravine blocking the path. Vaughn took a deep breath, letting his chest swell. With his feet, he leaped several meters high, grabbing hold of the thick vines dangling from the massive trees overhead. With a strange twist of his waist in midair, he pushed off the tree trunk with a completely counterintuitive motion. Using the rebounding force, he swung across the ravine and landed in the brush on the opposite side. Damn it! He got away again. Dave braked sharply, stopping at the edge of the ravine. He watched the faint rustling of the brush fade into the distance, and cursed angrily. This was their weekly simulated pursuit training. 30 bloodline warriors, each having awakened their talents, were divided into 2 teams. As hunters and prey, they engaged in a game of pursuit and relentless hunting in the vast primeval forests surrounding the frontier territory. This was a practical training program personally designed by Lord Harvey for these extraordinary soldiers. While they were forbidden from using lethal magic guns and blades, they were free to fully utilize the special abilities granted by their bloodline gifts, using any means necessary to escape or capture their targets. The bloodline warriors, bearing the role of prey, set out half a day earlier than the hunters. They tacitly chose to flee separately, hiding and escaping rather than operating in a group, thus minimizing the hunters' attention and consuming their pursuit time. Vaughn was always the first target, because his innate abilities were absolutely lethal. He was forbidden from using them during training, relying solely on the enhanced physical abilities granted by his bloodline gifts. Orcs, born into the dense forests of the northern wastes, are naturally skilled hunters. Even though he was forbidden from using his innate abilities, Vaughn relied on his vast experience and quick wits to repeatedly evade the hunting parties led by Dave and Wayne. Hearing the roars of his close comrades from across the mountain stream behind him, Vaughn couldn't help but chuckle. 2 days of 3 days of practical training had already passed. As long as he avoided being surrounded, he would be considered a perfect match after tonight. Next, he needed to find a natural shelter that could provide some shelter from the wind and rain, endure the extreme temperature swings between day and night, and then wait for sunrise to return to his territory. Vaughn leaped into the canopy of a tall tree and reconfirmed his current location. He realized that the all-night pursuit had inadvertently forced him to a call far from his territory. Looking southeast, he could already see the edge of the Greenwater swamp. It seemed they would have to set out early late tonight. Otherwise, with such a long journey, they might miss the afternoon gathering and the lavish, nutritious meal provided exclusively for the bloodline warriors at the barracks. Remembering the crispy, golden fried pork chop, the orcs swallowed hard and scrambled down from the treetops, wondering if they should catch a couple of plump rabbits for a sloppy dinner. According to the actual combat training, in addition to completing the tasks of pursuit and evasion, they also had to learn the skills of survival in the primitive jungle, crafting weapons, identifying natural medicines, building makeshift shelters, obtaining food, and practicing the application of their bloodline abilities. Vaughn unhooked a vine-supported sling from his waist, selected a few pebbles of suitable size, and prepared to head down the valley to hunt in the swampy area, where visibility was better, making it easier to spot small beasts hiding in the bushes and grass. If I had the gear Lord Harvey had made for me, I wouldn't have to hide like this. Daft and the others wouldn't be enough to keep me going, Vaughn muttered softly, slowly moving towards the swamp. A flock of plump pheasants poked their heads out from the brush, cackling as they gathered at the swamp's edge to feed on wild fruits. The Greenwater swamp was rich in delicious mushrooms and fresh wild fruits, a favorite not only of the wild beasts, but even the common people of the frontier territory would venture forth to gather them. All was returning with a bountiful harvest of fresh edibles. Vaughn crouched in a meadow a dozen meters away, using the dense weeds to conceal his form, trying to regulate his breathing. He only needed to wait for the pheasants to draw closer so he could unleash the slingshot. Suddenly, a strange noise rose from the depths of the swamp. Just as Vaughn was about to rise to throw a stone, a startled feeling came over him. He dropped back to the ground, squinting his eyes towards the swamp. What's that noise? Are we another resident of the territory sneaking in to gather food? Did the Lord strictly forbid anyone from entering the swamp during this time? Vaughn knew there were always those who, reluctant to forego the swamp's delicious produce, would risk sneaking in at night, either because they were greedy or hoping to earn a small fortune selling game. But the noise was growing louder, unlike anything an ordinary person could produce, and he didn't dare to show his face or act rashly. The pheasants, startled, flapped their wings and flew to the treetops, clucking in alarm. The next moment, a herd of enormous beasts, as big as wild camels, roared and panted as they burst from the swamp. Their massive limbs stomped the ground, shaking it and sending the surrounding birds and beasts scattering in panic. Vaughn looked up and was immediately horrified to see that each of the beasts bore a tall, burly figure with a deep red complexion. These strange creatures spoke in a strange, awkward foreign language, a word Vaughn couldn't understand. But upon seeing their bodies covered in natural scales, their strange patterns reflecting in the sunlight, Vaughn knew they were the demons Lord Harvey and Mr. Asdalen had spoken of. The demons had silently invaded the Greenwater swamp, less than a 3-day march from their territory. Had they truly set up camp at that natural mineral vein? Why hadn't the defense sentries monitoring their movements discovered them in advance? Vaughn estimated the group of demon soldiers mounted on giant beasts to be around a dozen. But he remembered what Mr. Asdalen had repeatedly emphasized in their theoretical class: when encountering demon soldiers mounted on monster beasts alone, never initiate the attack. Furthermore, he was without his greatest weapon, the magic spear. With only his bloodline-fortified physique, he couldn't face a dozen demon cavalrymen over 2 meters tall, carrying monster beasts. The demon cavalrymen galloped past Vaughn's hiding meadow, their pulse racing with nervousness. Every second felt like an eternity. He slowly supported himself with his hands and gently shoved backward, trying to lower himself into the grass. Unfortunately, a dead branch beneath him cracked slightly. A demon soldier at the end of the group whipped his head around in alarm. Vaughn instinctively looked up, his gaze meeting the soldier's bloodshot. Oh no! I've been discovered. Chapter 159 Bloodline Warriors vs. Demon Soldiers. Vaughn leaped from the meadow almost instantly, diving headfirst into the Greenwater swamp without a backward glance. Running on his own 2 legs, even with his bloodline fortifications, was no match for the 4-legged beast at the cavalry's lap. Vaughn could only hope that the beast, unfamiliar with the swamp's terrain, would be trapped by the rotting, soft mud, leaving him a glimmer of hope for escape. Vaughn himself was well versed in the green water swamp, knowing where the waist-deep mud lay and where the bottomless pits devoured both man and beast. He knew the general direction and could carefully dodge these terrifying natural traps at high speed. However, the loud, panting sounds approaching from behind made it clear that the demon soldier, who was pursuing him single-handedly, was no fool either. He followed Vaughn's path perfectly, never straying from his target, and would not be lured into any of the traps Vaughn had set along his path. Vaughn dove into the brush, narrowly avoiding a hut-sized, blazing fireball spewed from the mouth of the demonic beast beneath the demonic soldier's crotch. Like human spellcasters, these beasts could intermittently unleash simple yet powerful magical attacks. A searing pain shot through his back, likely caused by the fireball's accidental graze and burn. Vaughn leaped from the ground, picked up a sharp stone, and turned to face the approaching demonic soldiers. He was cornered at a pool deep within the swamp. Vaughn knew full well that this pool teemed with swamp crocodiles, and any creature that ventured in would inevitably be devoured. Since there was no escape, he decided to fight to the death. He took a deep breath, strove to regulate his breathing, and channeled the strength of his bloodline. He swiftly rolled sideways toward the charging demonic beast and the beast, simultaneously striking the beast in the side and abdomen with a powerful punch. At that moment, the demon soldier swung his gleaming blade, slashing across Vaughn's right shoulder, sending a spray of bright red blood splattering. The beast let out a deafening wail, its flank suddenly collapsing into a vast cavity, revealing its pale ribs and bloodied internal organs. A thrashing in intense agony tore the demon soldier off his back. Vaughn scooped up a handful of mud and smeared it across the bone-deep wound on his shoulder. Blood gushed out, dispersing much of the mud. He mobilized his shoulder muscles, forcing the wound closed, a gift unique to bloodline warriors. Even without awakened healing abilities, it could prevent the blood loss that would otherwise sap their combat effectiveness. The demon soldier, having fallen to the ground, adjusted his stance and charged at Vaughn, sword in hand, forcing him to tumble and dodge once more. Unable to block the blow with his weapon, Vaughn hurled his stone with such force that it struck the sword, nearly knocking it loose. In close combat, Vaughn got a clear look at the demon soldier's true form. He wore an iron helmet and half pauldrons, exposing his left chest. Their features were unlike those of the evil orcs, who were monstrous and deformed, resembling humanoid beasts. Beyond their crimson skin, scales, and crimson eyes, their other features resembled those of humans. Of course, their height, over 2 meters, was unmatched by ordinary humans. Even Vaughn, a half-orc, was a full head shorter. The demon soldier, nearly knocked off his weapon, grunted heavily, regripped his longsword, and swung at full force, aiming for Vaughn's side. Vaughn could only retreat once more, desperately trying to avoid the powerful blow. No. I can't fight this guy without weapons. I have to get close, or my bloodline abilities won't work. Vaughn dodged the enemy's relentless attacks, desperately trying to find a way to win from the danger. Wounds of varying sizes gradually appeared on his body, and blood oozed onto the muddy ground. The demon sword thrust forth again, but Vaughn no longer relied on his agility to evade it. Instead, he simply leaned slightly, avoiding the vital throat, allowing the sword to penetrate his shoulder with a whistling sound, pinning him to the tree trunk behind him. The momentum from the piercing blow also drove the demon soldier towards Vaughn, bringing the two of them face to face. At that moment, Vaughn clenched his fists and struck the opponent in the ribs with lightning speed, sending the demon soldier reeling backward. He tried to rise, but suddenly clutched his ribs and fell back to the ground, wailing in agony. Vaughn's bloodshot eyes blurred, but he could still see the demon soldier writhing on the ground. Blood gushed from both sides of his waist, and bloody intestines and parts of his internal organs flowed out through the gaping holes in his waist. He tried to hold his hands over the wounds to prevent his internal organs from falling out, but it was no use. After struggling for half a minute, the demon soldier finally stopped struggling and breathed his last in agony. Vaughn then struggled to pull out the blade that had pierced his shoulder. He walked over and decapitated the soldier with a single blow. He carried the soldier's head, along with a metal helmet, towards the dying demon beast, his abdomen pierced. The demon beast's intestines spilled onto the ground, and the rich smell of blood filled the entire pool, causing the giant crocodiles within to emerge and stir, gathering towards the area. Vaughn quickly strained his muscles, forcibly stemming the bleeding from the most severe injuries on his shoulders. Fortunately, his legs were not seriously injured, and he could easily make it back to the territory to report his encounter with the demons to the Lord and Commander Pierce. The Green Water Swamp was only a day's journey from the territory. If he ran at high speed, regardless of his injuries, he could reach the territory in half a day at most, which would surely allow the defense forces to complete their defenses and avoid being caught off guard by nearby demon soldiers. As dusk approached, Vaughn, from his relentless, frantic run, felt his wounds opening uncontrollably. Blood dripped along his path. Waves of dizziness from the excessive blood loss surged into his head, making it difficult for him to control his body as he ran, and he nearly fell several times. Hold on. Hold on a little longer. Vaughn gritted his teeth, fighting the relentless taste of blood rising in his throat as he ran without stopping. He could already vaguely see the towering furnaces in his territory, spewing thick plumes of smoke. Almost there. He felt his tense mind relax considerably. Suddenly, a figure leaped out from the bushes beside him. Vaughn, no longer able to react, was knocked to the ground by the sudden attack, nearly fainting. Haha. I finally caught a prey that wanted to return to the territory early. Huh? The clever ghost's ecstatic voice stopped abruptly. Vaughn. Why is it you? You? How did you get so badly injured? Damn, who could hurt you like this? Vaughn coughed up a ball of blood foam, rolled his eyes with difficulty, and took out a hideous crimson head from the backpack made of his shirt behind him. He hoarsely urged Tommy, hurry. Return to the territory and report to the Lord and Commander Pierce. Demons. I encountered a group of demon cavalry in the Green Water Swamp. Chapter 160 Territory Defense Level 1 Alert. Harvey was inspecting the territory's mines when he suddenly received an urgent message from Arstolan. By the time he quickly returned to the castle on his alchemy beast, Igno had already treated Vaughn's injuries and put him to sleep with a potion. What's going on? Where did they encounter the demon cavalry? Tommy, who had first spotted Vaughn, knelt on one knee and reported the details to Harvey. My lord, I found Vaughn in the woods outside the territory's east gate. He said a group of demon soldiers appeared near the Green Water Swamp. I examined his wounds, and they were indeed caused by a sharp blade. And this head, Harvey turned his head to the table where Tommy pointed, untied the blood-stained tatters of clothing, and revealed a hideous head with crimson skin, red eyes, red skin, and tiny scales covering the forehead. It was indeed the most typical appearance of a demon. Did the exploration team initially report that these creatures were suspected to be at the mining area on the edge of the swamp? How could this be? The mining area discovered by the exploration team is located on the eastern edge of the wasteland swamp. To reach the Green Water Swamp, the closest to the territory, would require traversing the entire rotten swamp area, a journey of approximately 3 days. This means that the demons aren't simply entrenched in that particular mining area, but are constantly expanding, rapidly conquering the surrounding areas in the form of small cavalry units. Are they searching for something? As Dallin, who used to live deep in the ice, was the most knowledgeable of the demons among their group. But even he couldn't understand how a group of demon soldiers could cross the vast ice field, weave through the dense and massive evil orc tribes in the wasteland, and stealthily reach the wasteland swamp area north of the God's Spine Mountains. Harvey didn't want to dwell on it. He decisively gave Pierce the order, have the territory's defense forces adjust their alert level to level 1, but don't sound the alarm to prevent panic and chaos. Have the Northern Frontier troops stationed at the camp immediately assemble, using combat battalions as units, and conduct a blanket search in the direction of the Green Water Swamp. Make sure to locate the demon cavalry that has infiltrated the territory and annihilate them completely. They absolutely couldn't let any of them escape and return to the natural mineral vein headquarters to alert the enemy. Harvey wasn't sure if his territory had been detected by the demons. His previous plan to wait until the Bloodline warriors completed their training, then launch a surprise attack while the enemy was in the open, was no longer feasible. In that case, it would be better to launch a direct assault, deploying a strong formation and using powerful magic lance firepower to wipe out the demons entrenched in the natural mineral vein. Just as night fell, the defense camp headquarters suddenly received an urgent order from the territory's highest commander. Suspected alien invasion, activate level 1 defense alert. All soldiers not assigned to guard or patrol the city walls quickly assembled and boarded their assigned sections of the wall. Then, according to their team structure, they quickly formed into combat teams and took up positions in the defensive forts built every few hundred meters. The entire frontier territory wall stretched a staggering 20 miles. Even if 2,000 defense soldiers were crammed onto the wall, There was no way every section could be manned. This was where the Northern Frontier troops stationed within the territory came in handy. They were responsible for assembling combat units in the direction of the enemy's main attack and launching a proactive attack. Captain, is this level 1 alert order tonight? Another large-scale drill. A captain in charge of the western section of the wall approached the commander of the 1st Defense Battalion and whispered. After all, it was well known that the Northern Frontier Army's daily training relied on field exercises, while the Defense Army's daily training relied on drills. Since the military restructuring and division, the soldiers assigned to the Defense Army had already experienced several large-scale, full-scale defense drills, both large and small. However, this was the first time they had conducted a level 1 defense drill. This meant that once the alarm sounded, they would need to ascend the city walls and maintain a state of high alert, armed with live ammunition, for a full 72 hours. The commander of the 1st Defense Battalion glanced at his captain, signaling him to peer down from the observation window of the defensive fortress. He saw that at some point, the western city gate had suddenly opened, and a large number of Northern Army soldiers in black uniforms, fully equipped, poured out of the territory. They quickly assembled outside the city gate, then dispersed into small combat teams, entered the dark, dense woodland, and quickly disappeared into the night. Is this a nighttime drill? Or, are they going to do it for real? The Defense Army Battalion commander stood on the 5-meter-high city wall, gnashing his teeth and pounding his fist on the wall bricks. Those bastards of the Northern Army have taken the opportunity to go out and fight and earn merit this time. Humph! A messenger ran all the way along the city wall and rushed into the western defense fortress. He reported to the battalion commander breathlessly, "Report. Sir, the Lord will be climbing the city wall soon to inspect the defensive fortifications of the western section of the wall. Commander Pierce wants you to make all preparations and not let down your guard." The originally depressed battalion commander of the 1st Battalion immediately jumped up as if he had been given chicken blood, grabbed the messenger and shouted, "The Lord is coming? Isn't this a drill? Is there really a foreign invasion?" The messenger struggled to break free, approached a trumpet-shaped alchemical device within the fortress, and inserted a phonograph stone from his waist pouch. After a burst of cacophony, Lord Harvey's calm and composed voice slowly rang out. "Men of the defense force. Attention. I am your Lord Harvey. Zzzz. The sentries have detected traces of demon cavalry in the Greenwater Swamp. Zzzz. The territory's defense alarm has been sounded. I demand, all troops enter level 1 alert. I reiterate. This is not a drill. This is not a drill, an alien invasion. The most ferocious and brutal demons of the northern wastes." The officers and soldiers in the western fortress of the city wall immediately rose to their full strength. Amidst the battalion commander's roar, they rushed to their respective sections of the wall and quickly relayed the Lord's instructions. The western section of the city wall, approximately 6 miles long, featured a massive defensive fort at the western gate. The top officers of the Defense Army gathered here with mixed feelings, engaged in a heated discussion over the detailed defensive map of the territory's walls. Everyone's emotions were extremely mixed. They didn't know whether they hoped a demon would actually break through the Northern Army's proactive counterattack and reach the territory's walls, allowing the Defense Army to be of use. Or they should pray that the arrogant Northern Army would truly be as powerful as a tiger, annihilating the foreign enemies directly outside the territory. The bloody and hideous demon head that Vaughn had severed and brought back was now being carried by messengers and circulated among the defense positions of the Defense Army. So this is what a demon looks like? Aside from the different skin color and red eyes, they're no different from us. Look, he was beheaded with his bare hands. The warriors who killed him didn't even use a magic gun to blow his head off. Chapter 161, Night Raid. Clever Tommy led his squad of soldiers, advancing swiftly through the dense, dark forest. Over 100 men, not a single one of them murmured a word. Each one, laden with heavy equipment and supplies, marched silently, following the soldiers ahead. Moonlight filtered through the gaps in the dense forest, casting dappled shadows, making the silent warriors resemble ghosts lurking in the shadows. Not all soldiers could march and fight in such nighttime conditions, but Tommy, the captain, was a transcendent warrior with an awakened bloodline gift. His awakened ability, the rare weakness insight, allowed him to see as clearly as in daylight, even in complete darkness. Tommy's squad also included a team leader who had awakened his ice bloodline, granting him exceptional night vision. Consequently, His squad was fortunately chosen as the vanguard of the entire campaign against the demons, operating at the forefront of the 10 combat teams. Tommy, without needing to activate his innate ability, could clearly see a flock of birds resting peacefully atop a treetop hundreds of meters away. He could even make out their flaming crimson feathers, now shimmering faintly in the moonlight. There was clearly no sign of enemy activity nearby. The small birds and beasts, long inhabiting the dense, primeval forest, served as a natural warning system. Tommy led his squad forward a short distance before suddenly raising his hand to signal a halt, commanding all soldiers to crouch and stand by. A half-orc soldier nimbly climbed to the top of a large tree, then quietly slid down to report back to Tommy. "Captain, we have reached the edge of the green water swamp." The soldier did not have Tommy's extraordinary night vision, but he could vaguely see the little flames burning on the flat meadow at the edge of the swamp. "I saw a fire at the foot of the hillside. Someone should be camping there." "It's too far away." Tommy nodded and climbed onto a huge rock to look out. He channeled the power of his bloodline into his eyes, and his vision immediately magnified dozens of times. He could clearly see more than a dozen gray-black beasts, even bigger than camels, lying on the flat ground of the meadow. 7 or 8 animal hide tents were surrounded by these giant beasts in the center. Several demon soldiers with dark red skin and red eyes were gathered in front of a campfire. They were probably on night watch. 19 demon beasts, 19 demon cavalrymen, Tommy muttered to himself. So a demon cavalry squad is composed of 20 men. Before setting off, he learned from the awakened Vaughn that when he encountered these demons in the green water swamp, he was just over 10 meters away. Yet the slightest noise was instantly detected. This also meant that these demons' innate ability might be their exceptional hearing, making stealthy close-range ambush impossible. However, the newly improved magic energy rifles issued to the Northern Frontier Army had a flat range of 500 meters. While the nighttime soldiers' accuracy was limited, a volley of 100 against 20 would essentially provide firepower coverage with 2 volleys. The problem was that the demon soldiers, huddled in their tents, were surrounded by these massive, hill-like monsters, making it impossible for Tommy to deploy his formation and launch a surprise attack from a distance. Vaughn had also warned them that these seemingly clumsy and heavy monsters were not only incredibly fast but could also spew terrifying fireballs the size of their heads, causing severe burns even if they were touched. "We have to find a way to divert these damned monsters, or break their defensive formation." After all, without actual combat experience against demons, Tommy couldn't predict how much damage the magic guns would inflict on the demon soldiers hiding behind them, even after penetrating these monsters. Tommy's 100-man combat squad split into 3 groups and slowly approached the meadow at the edge of the swamp from different directions. 300 meters from the demon camp, where a campfire was burning, they halted in unison and dispersed to hide. Tommy, the team leader, did not follow the group down the slope, but remained crouched on a towering boulder halfway up the slope, a full 400 or 500 meters from the camp. Although far away, this position afforded him a commanding vantage point, allowing Tommy to peer through the group of monsters and precisely lock onto the demon cavalrymen gathered around the campfire, on night watch. Distance was no great concern for him, as long as he could see his target. Any enemy within his sight became a living target. He rechecked his magic rifle, ensuring the magazine was fully loaded with 10 magic bullets. One was already half-activated, its subtle emanation of magical energy illuminating the inscriptions across the barrel. Taking a deep breath, Tommy closed his eyes and began channeling the abundant blood power within him, gradually converging from his throbbing heart to his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, his once dark pupils were stained with a brilliant silver white. His vision, magnified countless times, revealed a demon soldier seated by the campfire, rising to gather the firewood pile behind him, as if trying to add more fuel. He's on night watch, and he's actually removed his armor and helmet, leaving his weapons carelessly beside him. Tommy narrowed his eyes and sneered inwardly, "If you don't die, who will?" Then he decisively pulled the trigger. The head of the demon cavalryman squatting by the campfire, adding wood, suddenly exploded, blood and shattered brain matter scattering everywhere, covering the head and face of his companion sitting beside him. The 3 remaining demon soldiers on night watch were stunned, staring in horror as their companion's headless body swayed twice before falling heavily to the ground with a thud. A few seconds later, before they could recover, another thud sounded, and the head of another terrified demon soldier exploded. The last demon finally realized something was wrong and pulled out a bone flute from his pocket. He blew it for a moment before his head exploded, blood and brain matter splattering all over the ground. A thick, bloody odor spread, and the monsters surrounding the camp began to stir, emitting a low, humming sound. Several demon soldiers suddenly burst out of their tents, and screamed in shock at the bizarre and tragic scene around the campfire. More demon soldiers rushed out of the tents, brandishing sharp blades and climbing onto the backs of the monsters. However, none of them noticed any trace of the enemy nearby, and they were left wandering around the camp like headless flies. Several monsters uncontrollably spewed fireballs, but without a clear target, and even accidentally set several demon soldiers' tents on fire. The demon cavalry, riding high on the monsters' backs, now looked like sitting ducks in the bright moonlight. The Northern Army soldiers, who had been lying in ambush, finally received a signal to attack. They rose from their half-crouches in the dense brush and grass, raised their rifles, and began firing at the demons riding the monsters' backs. The air was filled with a constant crackling sound, the sound of energy beams emanating from the rapid firing of the magic guns. One demon after another, riding on the beasts, fell with a muffled groan. Barely a minute later, only a few wounded but still living beasts remained in the camp, sprawled on the ground, wailing uncontrollably. Tommy had barely made it halfway up the slope to the battlefield on the meadow below when the battle was already over. Stab all the surviving beasts in the eyes. That should destroy their brains, Tommy shouted, commanding the soldiers to begin cleanup work as quickly as possible. See if there are any surviving demons. Tie them up and drag them back to the territory. They might be useful for the Lord's research experiments. A soldier approached and asked, Captain, where are the dead demons? Tommy curled his lips, remembering Vaughn's heroic feat of slaying demon soldiers barehanded in the tent, and a trace of longing filled him. Cut off their heads. We can show off to those ironclad turtles in the defense army when we return. The soldiers laughed in unison and began to cut up their trophies. Chapter 162 Battle for the Mineral Vein. The messenger raised the communication alchemy device high in the air and ran past a group of soldiers to catch up with his captain. Captain Wayne received combat intelligence from the 3rd team of the 1st Battalion. Wayne immediately stopped, raised his hand to signal the soldiers to slow down their march, and grabbed the young messenger. Isn't the 3rd team the spearhead outpost? Did they encounter the enemy? Yes, they discovered a group of demon soldiers on the shore of the green water swamp. Taking advantage of the night, they decisively launched a surprise attack and wiped them out. Wayne narrowed his eyes and muttered viciously, Damn it, Tommy got the upper hand again. Night, dense forest, surprise attack. When these keywords came out of the messenger's mouth, he knew that Tommy would never miss. Although this guy's bloodline talent did not directly strengthen his body, it was just as deadly, and more concealed and invisible. He was simply a natural long-range sneak attacker. Wayne recalled a time when he, under the Lord's orders, had gone to Grizzly Castle to assassinate a Union spellcaster. If he had possessed Tommy's talent, the mission's difficulty would have been significantly reduced, and he wouldn't have had to endure days of torment, crouching motionless on the rooftop. Tommy's team is delayed in the Greenwater Swamp area. That means, the new sharp knife outpost is now ours, Wayne whispered to the soldiers gathered around him. They've already engaged the demons and achieved victory. Now it's up to us. His mind was preoccupied with a single thought, reaching the natural mineral vein at the end of the wasteland swamp before the other teams. Although Commander Pierce had instructed that whichever combat team arrived first must remain on guard and wait for all the other teams to arrive and assemble before launching a simultaneous attack, getting ahead of them and securing a favorable attacking position wouldn't be a problem. For this impromptu operation, the Northern Army mobilized a full 1,000 experienced soldiers, organized into 10 powerful combat squads. Nearly every squad was led by transcendents like Wayne and Tommy, who had awakened their bloodline talents. As long as the demonic forces entrenched in the swampy mineral veins weren't many times their own, Wayne judged victory in this assault wouldn't be difficult. A sharp bird whistle rang out, and the makeshift military camp in the dense forest erupted in a silent frenzy. Daff rushed out of his tent, half hidden in the thick leaf litter, and quickly ran to the soldiers' earthen mounds to take up his position. He didn't need to shout at his men to quickly maneuver. They had practiced this combat procedure countless times at the valley outposts and the territory camps, and everyone knew exactly what they were supposed to do at this moment. The deputy team leader, hunched over, ran along the shallow trench and whispered to Dave, "Boss, Captain Wayne of Squad 2 has sent a message to prepare for engagement. In half a quarter of an hour, Commander Pierce will lead the assembled squads 4 to 10 and launch a direct attack on the demon camp in the mining area." Squad 2 and I will block this valley and prevent them from fleeing. Dave nodded, then turned and gritted his teeth in dissatisfaction. The elite 1st Battalion of the Northern Frontier Army was deployed for this operation. Unfortunately, with Captain Vaughn seriously injured in the Territory Infirmary, Commander Pierce was personally commanding them. Surprisingly, the strongest squads 1 and 2, the ones led by Dave and Wayne, were assigned to the secondary front, tasked with intercepting any remaining demons that might flee from the front lines. Squad 3, led by Tommy, was still en route and unlikely to participate in the initial direct engagement. But long training and strict military discipline ensured that even with his frustrations, Duff remained calm and swift in carrying out his commander's orders. He repeatedly moved back and forth between the various combat groups' bunkers, carefully checking everyone's ammunition and weapons. He also repeatedly dispatched soldiers to climb tall trees to observe the situation in the mining area below. Time ticked by, and suddenly, from the distant hilltops, faint shouts emanated, followed by an even more intense commotion in the mining area below. Captain Pierce and his men have begun their attack on the demons in the mine. Duff, perched on the high slope, strained to peer down, but the dense jungle completely obscured his view, rendering him unable to see anything. Those big guys. They're coming. Everyone, attention. Fire. A row of soldiers, crouched in the trenches, rose in unison, swiftly raising their rifles to a conspicuous target 100 meters away, and pulled the trigger. Without waiting to see the results of the volley, they pulled the bolt again to reload and fire. In such close combat, aiming was theoretically unnecessary. Simply holding the magic lance level and firing at the target would invariably annihilate a large number of the enemy lined up to die. After 2 volleys, the charging beasts fell to the ground, their massive bodies thumping against the ground with a thud. Only then did the soldiers realize that these beasts were carrying humans on their backs, the very demon cavalry their superiors had so often mentioned. Thrown off by the monsters' gunshot wounds, the demon cavalrymen were trampled by the rampaging beasts in the chaos, barely able to utter a wail before being killed instantly. Some, fortunate enough to avoid being crushed by their mounts, barely managed to stand up when they were shot on the chest and thrown back to the ground. Charge! Charge! Watch out for the enemy ahead. They might be using the corpses of those monsters for cover, the captains of the main attacking squads shouted, directing their soldiers to carefully circumvent the charging monster carcasses and advance on foot into the mining area. Sure enough, several surviving demon soldiers, hiding behind the thick layers of monster carcasses, suddenly leaped out and roared to attack. A soldier who had just attached a bayonet to his lance had no time to fire back. He could only grit his teeth and hold his lance horizontally, attempting to block the enemy's downward blow. With a crack, the ordinary cast iron magic lance could not withstand the heavy blow and broke in half. The soldier, who was 2 heads shorter than the demon cavalry, was also struck down by the powerful blow. The nearby soldiers immediately raised their lances to return fire, roaring and unloading the magic bullets in their magazines on the demon who had just killed his comrade, instantly riddling him with wounds. More and more demon cavalry began to use various demon carcasses or boulders as cover, waiting for the soldiers to approach before launching a surprise attack. The battle gradually shifted from a one-sided massacre to a brutal close-quarters engagement, forcing the Northern Army soldiers into fierce hand-to-hand combat with the powerful demons. Pierce keenly perceived the enemy's intentions and immediately deployed a large number of wolf spider beasts, who had been on standby, to the battlefield. They began to search and chase away the hidden enemies, exposing them to the soldiers' guns. Several Northern Army officers who had awakened their bloodline talents, after emptying their magazines, drew their specially prepared alchemical swords and charged to the front, defending the ordinary soldiers from the approaching demon cavalry. An officer with a half-orc appearance, brandishing a long sword that shone with a faint, cold white light, collided with a tall demon wearing half-shoulder armor. The moment the 2 equally sharp weapons collided, the cold light from the orc officer's longsword quickly spread to the opponent's weapon, then, without slowing down, spread up along the opponent's wrist and arm, freezing half of his body. The bloodline warrior's innate ability, Ice Blade, was unleashed. The orc officer kicked the frozen demon over, swung his longsword, and was about to plunge it directly into the demon's throat when a fireball suddenly flew from the side and slammed into his back, sending him flying several meters to the ground. Ironhead, a comrade who was also engaging the demon in close combat, screamed. Ironhead, struck by the fireball, twitched twice and slowly climbed to his feet. His back and side of his face were seared blood red by the blazing flames, His skin completely ulcerated and festered, but he still lowered his head to pick up his fallen longsword and return to the frozen demon. With gnashing teeth, he chopped off the opponent's head with a terrified look. "Damn it! You almost roasted me. It hurts so much. Damn it!" The vitality of the bloodline warrior is much stronger than that of ordinary people. It is not a problem for him to withstand several magical attacks from low-level spellcasters. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163, Chasing Down the Enemy and Killing Them All. A commotion began to creep up from the dense forest at the foot of the mountain. Through the thick trees, Daff could vaguely discern a group of dark figures rapidly advancing toward him. Captain Pierce and his men had indeed swiftly routed the demon soldiers entrenched in the mining area, forcing them into the woods at the mouth of the mountain. He roughly estimated the number of fleeing demons, perhaps over 100. This indicated that the demon army occupying the mining area was not particularly large to begin with, a weak and isolated force. Captain Pierce's orders to him and Wayne were to not spare any demons attempting to flee the battlefield. This meant not only stopping the fleeing soldiers but also preventing them from scattering and entering the forest, where they would be difficult to pursue. Daff raised his magic rifle, shook off the fallen leaves, and turned to signal his deputy, the team leader, to blow the bird's whistle, signaling alternate fire. This arduous path, wedged between two steep cliffs, was less than 10 meters wide. Without the ability to scale the cliffs, the demonic soldiers had no choice but to squeeze through under their noses. Having soldiers alternate firing, individually targeting and killing each one was the most efficient and effective attack method. After the soldiers in the first row of cover fired 5 rounds, the soldiers in the second row would take over, allowing the former to reload their empty mana rifles, and so on. However, as the fleeing demons neared their intercepting line, something unexpected happened. After 3 volleys of volleys, the startled demonic beasts immediately spewed massive fireballs, which flew over the cover and slammed into the trenches where the soldiers were hiding. Although the direct hit rate was pitifully low, it still caused chaos along the entire front. The heat wave from the fireball's impact kicked up a cloud of dirt, and the deafening explosion made Daff's ears ring. The monsters, shot on the head and falling to the ground, blocked the narrow mountain path. The demon soldiers couldn't advance, and the northern army couldn't fire freely through the piles of corpses. Those damn demons. Damn it. They took those stupid bastards with them even when they were trying to escape. Now they've blocked their own escape route, Daff cursed, spitting out a mouthful of dirt. At the other end of the fork in the call, Wayne's battlefield, tasked with intercepting the fleeing demons, faced a similar problem. For a moment, the narrow valley entrance was jammed with 200-man Northern Army squads and hundreds of demon soldiers with their monsters. Other Northern Army squads, advancing into the mining area from behind, began to gradually close in on the fleeing demons, already utterly emaciated by the strange, powerful weapons in their hands, had no intention of organizing an effective counterattack. They scattered like headless flies, many even abandoning their mounts, shedding their armor and preparing to scale the mountain walls with their bare hands. "Captain, they're not charging us anymore. What should we do?" Dave gritted his teeth, unsheathed the alchemical blade slung from his waist, and roared to the other 2 bloodline warriors in his squad. "What are we waiting for? Wait until the bloodline warriors from the other squads have mowed down these demons before we go and clean up the mess? Charge!" The 2 men, whose names were called, could no longer contain the primordial strength within them. Upon hearing their captain's order, they excitedly drew their melee weapons, leaped from their trenches with a snarling grin, and, howling, they charged towards the fleeing demons at the mountain's mouth. "Duff? Damn it, you're charging in too." Wayne wielded his long-handled sword, ablaze with deadly heat, and slashed down a demon soldier who charged at him. His innate ability imbued his weapon with a searing sharpness, allowing him to slice through the solid metal armor like a red-hot knife through butter. Narrowly avoiding a ball of fire barreling straight at him, Daff slammed into the arms of a demon soldier, plunging his long sword into his heart. "Damn it. Only a fool would stay in the trenches waiting for them to charge and die. If we don't come, the credit will be snatched away by the other squads down in the call." 2 more demon soldiers swung their long swords at him. Daff lacked the weapon-strengthening innate ability of the others, relying solely on the physical skills enhanced by his awakened bloodline. He gritted his teeth and held the two weapons simultaneously struck at him with his sword. Wayne rushed to support, stabbing the opponent in the waist with his blade and then kicking him to the ground with a flying kick, giving Dave a moment to breathe. He then crouched down and slashed, severing the remaining unfortunate man's legs. Too many demon soldiers are blocking the mountain valley. We shouldn't have rushed in so recklessly, Wayne muttered, frowning as he brandished his scorching long blade. Dav, let's retreat. Once Commander Pierce and the others come up, we'll turn around and take care of them. Amidst the chaos, Dave turned to look at the two of his teammates who had charged with him. They too were surrounded by 7 or 8 powerful demon soldiers, but thanks to their great strength and ice bloodline abilities, they were barely holding their own. He also vaguely realized the rashness of his order to charge. Only after engaging these demon soldiers in close combat could he truly understand the disparity in combat power between them and the evil orcs. These men were not only massive, but also far stronger than ordinary humans. Though merely ordinary soldiers, they possessed the natural strength of a bloodline warrior, and each seemed a seasoned and skilled fighter. Furthermore, the massive, fire-breathing magical beasts that followed them closely, combined, without the support of their magic spears and alchemical beasts, made the Northern Army no match. The 5 or 6 bloodline warriors that Wayne and I had led were clearly underwhelmed by the siege of these valiant demonic soldiers. Commander Pierce's casual remark during officer training, "Don't pursue a desperate enemy," was precisely what he meant. An enemy trapped in a desperate situation often unleashes a far greater fighting power and a greater will to survive. His mind faltered for a moment, and Daff was immediately vulnerable. A demon soldier, who had attacked from the side, slashed his side with a knife. Blood gushed out immediately, but the wound lasted only a fraction of a second before the torn flesh began to wriggle and close. While the wound didn't heal instantly, it didn't cause any significant bleeding either. This was Daff's bloodline gift, enhanced healing. Following Daff's whistle, Wayne and the others gradually retreated toward their own blocking line. The demon soldiers, seemingly sensing the reckless intruder's retreat, naturally refused to let them off easily, gathering around him and charging them relentlessly. Suddenly, the foremost demon soldier's massive, crimson head exploded with a bang. Inertia sent his body hurtling forward 2 steps before staggering and collapsing to the ground. Wayne was overjoyed. Without even turning around to look at the situation behind him, he loudly reminded his comrades around him, "Damn it! Why are you retreating? Tommy is finally here." As soon as he finished speaking, there were 2 more bangs of heads exploding, as if responding to his shout. Chapter 164, Harvesting the Fruits of Victory. Pierce stood in the mining area, where the battlefield had just been cleared, and raised his hand to give Wayne and Dave 2 slaps in the face. The blows were hard and symmetrical, one on the left and one on the right. The only difference was that Dave's face was swollen for only a few seconds before it quickly subsided, while Wayne's face was swollen so much that the corners of his mouth were almost split. "Did you not pay attention to the usual command lessons? You left your own soldiers and single-handedly led your bloodline warriors to attack the fleeing demon army that outnumbers you 10 times? I think you deserve military punishment." Dave and Wayne hung their heads and dared not say a word. They could only stand there and listen to Pierce's scolding. If Tommy hadn't arrived and asked him to rush to your aid, you would have been killed right there today. Don't think you're invincible just because you've awakened your bloodline talent. The demons aren't enemies you can easily defeat like the evil orcs. If there's even a demon priest hiding among these fleeing soldiers, I'll have to collect your bodies today. Pierce took the battle report from his deputy and glanced at it with a frown, still feeling a pang of heartache. Even though this isolated demon army entrenched in the mining area lacked powerful spellcasters like priests, it still inflicted considerable casualties on his team. The casualties were highest due to the demon beast's fireballs, with over 30 ordinary soldiers killed by the explosions and approximately 100 suffering varying degrees of burns. Fortunately, he had brought along a medical alchemist and a large supply of magic potions with him on this mission, which helped stabilize the seriously injured and allow them to return to the territory for treatment. Over a dozen soldiers died in direct confrontations with demonic forces. Without the long-range advantage of their magic lances, ordinary soldiers were no match for the massive and powerful demons in close combat. Had it not been for the early deployment of alchemical beasts and the addition of bloodline warriors, the casualties would have been far greater. Lord Harvey had once casually mentioned to him that a loss of 1/10 of the troops in a small-scale battle was considered a very ideal outcome, practically a complete victory. But soldiers' lives were precious, especially those who had undergone rigorous training, mastered the use of magic lances, and adhered to strict discipline in battle. Every loss was a painful experience for Pierce. Fortunately, the bloodline warriors he had painstakingly trained remained intact. While several were severely wounded and nearly incapacitated, their enhanced vitality was strong enough that there was no need to worry about their fatalities. Commander, we've found some strange objects in the demon camp. Some resemble those strange alchemical instruments invented by the Lord? Huh? Alchemical instruments? Pierce frowned slightly. He hadn't heard Instructor Asdalen mention the existence of alchemists among the demons. He followed the soldiers responsible for cleaning up the battlefield to the center of the ruined demon camp. Sure enough, he saw an ugly, oddly shaped tower-shaped instrument standing in a makeshift mine near the mountainside of the mining area. Can you call this an alchemical instrument, in terms of material, shape, and aesthetics? It couldn't compare to the sophisticated and beautifully constructed alchemical devices assembled by Lord Harvey and Reiner. Why would the demons dig a shallow mine here and then move this machine into it? The soldier quickly handed over an even stranger object, a cylindrical metal canister, about the thickness of a forearm, covered in rust. We've discovered numerous strange jars of this kind in the demon soldiers' tents and in this mine. They appear to contain some liquid, but everyone is strictly adhering to the rules and refusing to open them. Pierce, pleased with the soldiers' vigilance, had them place the jar on a rock deep within the cave. He then ordered everyone to retreat to the cave entrance. He then grabbed a magic rifle, casually aimed it at the top opening of the jar, and pulled the trigger. With a soft sizzle, the jar fell to the ground, and a pool of colorless, transparent liquid slowly flowed out of the breach, only to evaporate in an instant. Pierce snorted, using his vampire's exceptional sense of smell to discern nothing unusual or strange. Strange. This is clearly not water or alcohol, nor is it poison. It evaporated so quickly after being exposed to the air, he didn't bother to explore further, and decisively waved his hand, saying, "Take it all back. The knowledgeable Lord will surely know its origins and uses." The task of clearing and cleaning up the battlefield wasn't tedious. This demonic army numbered only 500, and none of them had mounted beasts. There were fewer than 100 of them, all of whom had been killed on the spot by the Northern Army. The beasts' flesh and blood smelled extremely sour, and Pierce had no intention of using them as rations. The territory's newly built food factory had already mass-produced a wide variety of special agent rations, meticulously packaged in durable tin cans. From tender stewed beef and mutton to delicious mushroom and chicken soup and incredibly filling compressed wheat cakes, they had everything they needed, ensuring the soldiers could always fill their mouths even while on the battlefield. Don't waste these beasts' hides. They actually have 2 layers of hide. The outer layer is incredibly tough, while the inner layer is incredibly soft and gentle. They're simply the perfect material for marching uniforms. The sergeant in charge of military supplies was overjoyed, instructing the soldiers cleaning up the battlefield to carefully remove the hides. Pierce quickly ordered, "Take their weapons and armor too. Send them back to the iron foundry, and they can be smelted directly into ingots for reforging new weapons." Life was a matter of thriftiness, and Pierce always remembered Harvey's advice: a good modern army relies on strong logistical support and equipment. Commander. Something's wrong. A young military doctor rushed over. Before he could report the situation, Pierce felt a dull headache. It was his first time leading a unit in a long-distance battle, and so many unexpected events had occurred, with heavy casualties. He felt like a completely unsuccessful commander. "What happened?" the young military doctor said, his face quivering, his lips twitching as he hesitated to speak. "Come with me to the medical station." Due to the overwhelming number of casualties in the battle, the logistics team responsible for field medical care had been forced to erect several makeshift tents to serve as field medical stations. When Pierce arrived, he discovered it wasn't a case of a sudden worsening of a soldier's injuries or some other sudden incident resulting in casualties. Instead, several ordinary soldiers, covered with their hands, squatted at the entrance of the medical tent, sweating profusely, their faces gazing anxiously at their commander. "What the hell is going on? You stand up and tell me," Pierce, his face furious, randomly called out to a squatting soldier, demanding he report directly to him. The soldier instinctively stood up, but he couldn't let go of his hand, stammering. "Commander, those idiots found some wild fruit in the demon soldier's tent. It smelled delicious, so they couldn't help but share it and stuffed it into their mouths. The young military doctor rolled his eyes in annoyance and continued, before they could swallow it, they found their mouths were somehow stuck shut. They couldn't open them. They tried to reach out and dig out the strange fruit, but their hands got stuck too. What? You dared to eat something you found from the aliens? Are you the reincarnation of starving ghosts? Pierce's eyes almost popped out, and he didn't know what to say to these idiots. The military doctor quickly handed Pierce the strange fruit that had stuck to the soldier's mouth. It's not poisonous, otherwise they would have died long ago. There are plenty of these fruits growing in the nearby mountains and forests, but the demon soldiers seem to know not to eat them and just pick and collect them. Pierce looked at the bright red, plump wild fruit in his hand, smelling its sweet fruity aroma, and immediately understood why they couldn't resist consuming it. Quick, have the first group of soldiers returning to the territory take these idiots with them. Tell Lord Agno to find a way to pry their mouths open. If we delay for a few more days, they'll die of thirst and starvation. He turned and instructed the young military doctor, send someone to the nearby woods to gather more of these fruits and bring them back to Lord Harvey. Chapter 165, Soul-Melting Ore and Strange Wild Fruits. Harvey put down the paper battle report in his hand, stood up, walked to Pierce and patted him on the shoulder. Don't be too depressed. I said that less than 1/10 of the combat casualties is already a very ideal result. I am very satisfied with your performance, Pierce. As Dallin chuckled and took over the conversation, he feels sorry for the soldiers who were trained with great difficulty. After all, we spent so much time and energy teaching them how to transform from refugees, serfs and herdsmen into warriors who can skillfully use magical weapons. Harvey sighed, battle always brings death. None of us can avoid it. Our soldiers are selected from ordinary people, and we will recruit more soldiers who are willing to fight bravely to protect their homes, collect their remains properly and arrange for the municipal department to distribute the pensions to their families as soon as possible. As for the military funeral, don't be perfunctory. He regained his spirits and asked Pierce carefully, that natural mineral vein has been occupied by the demons for so long, and there is no sign of mining at all. Pierce nodded and answered honestly, yes, they only dug a few shallow pits and gave up without even exploring the location of the mineral vein. He paused, then added, but I've already had that strange instrument in the pit and the piles of metal canisters filled with an unknown liquid brought back. They should be in the underground lab by now. Harvey interrupted him with a smile, saying, then what are we waiting for? Let's go see what their tech tree is all about. Reiner approached the strange, twisted tower-shaped instrument, examining it from front to back, completely baffled by its true purpose. It looks like a pile of discarded metal parts, haphazardly cobbled together. The tower-shaped instrument was indeed rudimentary in appearance. The metal shell was pitted and stained with rust. Atop it sat a transparent cover inlaid with a spherical crystal. A thin metal tube pierced through it, connecting to a base below. The base was clearly recessed, suggesting it needed some additional device to complete the whole. Harvey was itching to dismantle it, to examine its internal structure and see if there were any inscriptions that could harness magical energy to operate. As Dallin suddenly intervened, wait. I think I know what this thing is used for. He picked up a strange metal canister, also seized from the mine, and gently shook it, hearing the sound of water inside. He then walked directly to the tower-shaped instrument and inserted the canister into the groove at a base, fitting it snugly. That's it. Harvey widened his eyes and asked in confusion, this jar and this instrument are actually a match? What exactly do they do? As Dallin thought and recalled for a while, then slowly said, I used to live in the northern kingdom of eternal night founded by ancient wizards for a long time. I have heard some wizards who fought against the demons mention that this thing seems to be used by the demons to enhance the soldiers' physical functions. Potion, Harvey suddenly realized and immediately asked, so this jar contains the strengthening potion carried by the demon soldiers? This instrument is the machine that produces these potions. As Dallin nodded and continued to explain, yes, this potion is different from the magic potion used in the Blood Warrior awakening ceremony. It is not a one-time take that can make the demon soldiers have a strong physique permanently, but it needs to be used repeatedly. Every time the effect of the potion wears off, the soldiers need to replenish it. The three big words stimulant instantly popped up in Harvey's mind. Taking it once, it works for a while, then repeating after the effects wear off. Isn't that the typical way stimulants are used? How is this potion formulated? What are the side effects of repeated use? It can actually unleash the powerful physical abilities of demon soldiers comparable to those of bloodline warriors, so there must be some limitations, right? Harvey was certain that this thing must have some negative effects. Otherwise, during the war between the two races in the Evil Moon Mountains, these drug-addled demon soldiers would have long since overwhelmed the human spellcasters and the Judgment Army. As Dallin nodded, agreeing with Harvey's speculation. Indeed, while the strengthening potion can be freely administered to demon soldiers, the dosage and usage cycle must be strictly controlled. Exceeding the limit or using it too frequently will instantly cause the soldier's entire body to wither and die. Furthermore, the origin of this potion is extremely strange. Ancient wizards never managed to decipher the true formula. They only know that the main ingredient is a magical mineral called melting spirit ore, which needs to be transformed by this instrument before it can be poured into special jars and distributed to the demon army. Harvey, after hearing Asdalin's complete description, immediately connected all the clues and vaguely grasped the answer. This isolated demon force that had accidentally strayed to the Divine Spine Mountains was most likely a small unit within the demon army's massive attack on the evil orcs, responsible for the southern offensive. After encountering the evil orcs' stubborn resistance, they were forced to retreat further south to the foot of the Divine Spine Mountains for unknown reasons, losing contact with the main demon army. During this long battle, the demonic troops' supply of strengthening potions gradually depleted, forcing them to urgently seek a replenishment. Using a secret method of prospecting, they located a naturally occurring vein of magic stone and set up equipment to transform the potion, preparing to produce potions to strengthen their soldiers. However, upon beginning excavation, they discovered that the mine was far more difficult to mine than anticipated. The possible soul-melting ore within it lay deep within the earth, making it impossible to extract without specialized methods. They anxiously dispatched several outposts to explore the surrounding area, searching for other possible branches of the vein, as those at shallower depths would be easier to mine. Naturally, the exploration team dispatched by Harvey discovered a trail, which then attracted a full-scale encirclement by the Northern Frontier Army. The demonic soldiers, depleted of potions and gradually weakened, were unable to resist and were annihilated near the mining area. A team that relies on drugs to boost its combat effectiveness will always have huge weaknesses and flaws. Harvey sighed and made his final judgment. Once their supplies are cut off, the team's morale and combat effectiveness will plummet, and they will eventually fall into an irreversible desperate situation. Taking this into consideration, he basically completely gave up the idea of cracking the demon enhancement potion and using it on his own army soldiers. Compared to the actual magic guns in his hands, relying on potions to forcibly increase combat effectiveness is an extremely dangerous and undesirable behavior. Oh right. There's also that strange fruit that grows near the mining area. I heard that it has ruined several greedy soldiers. Has Egno figured out a way to save them? Reiner couldn't help but burst into laughter. Sir, the problem was solved the very day the people were sent here. Although the fruit is extremely sticky, as long as you pour strong liquor on it, it will immediately melt and no longer have such strong stickiness, but the teeth of those unlucky guys can't be saved. The fruit flesh stuck in their mouths for too long, and when it was taken out, a mouthful of teeth was pulled out along with it. Egno is now worried about how to give them a mouthful of metal dentures. Chapter 166 Natural Rubber Fruit. 2 days later, Harvey, obsessed with disassembling and studying demonic pharmaceutical equipment, was suddenly begged by Egno to visit the Territory Hospital. Hasn't a solution already been found for this fruit? Harvey asked, somewhat puzzled, as he took the exotic wild fruit from Egno and weighed it in his palm. Egno cheerfully explained, no, sir, you have no idea how much this tiny, exotic fruit can contribute to the Territory Hospital's treatment technology. He donned a pair of special leather gloves, picked up the fruit, crushed it on a metal tray, and then lifted a massive sticky pulp to show Harvey. This completely non-toxic, strong adhesive can completely replace silk sutures. Simply apply it to the wound as a dressing, and it will heal, and there's no need to remove the stitches afterwards, he explained, pulling Harvey aside and showing him a soldier brought back from the mining battlefield. The massive knife wound on his leg was covered in a thick layer of jam. Not only is it a clean, non-toxic wound adhesive dressing, but it also has a certain degree of hemostatic, swelling-reducing, and pain-relieving properties. It's truly a miracle cure for trauma. Harvey realized the extraordinary potency of this tiny wild fruit. He immediately summoned a personal guard and instructed him to inform Pierce and arrange for the security team still stationed in the mining area to gather large quantities of this wild fruit from the surrounding area and send it back to the territory. Egno quickly added, not only should we collect the ripe fruit, but we should also find a way to dig up some young fruit trees. This fruit doesn't even have seeds inside, so I suspect it relies on its roots to reproduce. He planned to transplant some of the fruit into his own potion plantation. If the survival rate was high, he would set aside a dedicated area within the territory to plant large quantities, rapidly accelerating its growth. Harvey asked in confusion, "How did you discover that using strong liquor could dissolve the stickiness of these fruits, freeing those unfortunate soldiers?" Egno smiled smugly. "It was just a coincidence. When they were brought in, I noticed their faces were covered in scars from desperately digging at their mouths, which had been stuck shut. I had the doctors disinfect them with distilled liquor, and surprisingly, it dissolved the sticky fruit pulp. Though the principle wasn't clear, the various exotic substances in this world seem to follow certain rules of mutual growth and mutual restraint. This fruit's powerful adhesive properties weren't just for medical applications, but also for other applications requiring strong adhesion, for example, the structural bonding of delicate alchemical instruments." Egno then removed a large, dark lump from the alchemical crucible and placed it before Harvey. "Sir, I tried boiling the pulp of this fruit in a crucible, and it unexpectedly melted and solidified into this black substance with very strange properties, soft, elastic, and yet solid." Harvey instinctively took the black mass and gently squeezed it. It was indeed elastic, but it immediately returned to its original shape, refusing to be twisted into any shape. "Wait? Elastic?" A sudden flash of inspiration struck Harvey, a sudden, strangely familiar connection. "Isn't this natural rubber? Natural rubber extracted from wild fruit. This is simply incredible." He immediately had Egno remove all the condensed fruit from the boiled fruit, then left the infirmary without looking back, returning to his basement laboratory in the castle. Reiner used the high-temperature welding torch on his arm, condensing a thin flame and gently cutting through the black pectin block. A faint white smoke rose from the cut surface of the black pectin when exposed to fire. Harvey sniffed it and found it wasn't the familiar odor of burning rubber. He returned the cut pectin to the crucible and heated it, where it gradually melted into viscous black liquid. Upon cooling, it regained its elastic solid state. In every respect, this pectin was identical to rubber, lightweight, highly resilient, heat polymerizable, and reversible. This meant that this pectin could be applied to surfaces after heating. Upon cooling, it would form a special rubber-like coating, capable of covering specific objects like wounds, enhancing their durability. Removing this coating was also simple. Simply spraying it with distilled spirits, a traditionally concocted alcohol, would instantly dissolve it. Harvey immediately had Reiner conduct a series of tests. Ultimately, they confirmed the substance's exceptionally wide range of applications. Ordinary acids wouldn't easily corrode it, and while it would harden slightly upon freezing, it wouldn't deform or crack easily, though its elasticity would be slightly less than at room temperature. Compared to fresh fruit pulp, heated pectin loses its strong adhesive properties, but it possesses waterproof properties. When heated and kneaded into a container, it can easily be filled with water without any signs of seepage. Its only drawback is its inability to withstand high temperatures, like rubber. Upon contact with the intense heat of flames, it instantly melts into viscous liquid, requiring further cooling and solidification. When I have a chance, I can use my newly invented electromagnetic technique to test whether this pectin possesses the same insulating properties as rubber. Even if it doesn't, it's no big deal. After all, I don't have the ability to manually create a generator yet, so I don't really need insulating materials as a powerful boost to technological development. But the applications of this pectin coating are vast. All alchemical instruments prone to decay and rust, metal energy pipelines, and even those buried in the territory's 3-link project, can all be treated with this natural waterproof and rust-proof coating, greatly extending their lifespan. And then there's Harvey's long-cherished, yet unrealized, vehicle invention, a magically powered car with real rubber tires. After all, capturing living creatures and transferring their souls to create various alchemical beasts cannot truly replace conventional transportation. So far, Harvey has only managed to acquire a dozen or so expensive man-war beasts through the chance capture of a batch of wild mammoths. Widespread adoption of these beasts is simply impossible. Looking at the black jelly in his hand, Harvey's mind is already racing with ideas for a host of new inventions: bicycles for all civilians in the territory, magical carriages and sedans capable of long-distance travel within the territory, even high-speed troop transports equipped with elastic rubber tracks that can navigate mountainous terrain with ease. It's true that only with rubber wheels can the historical wheel of technological development in the territory truly roll forward. Chapter 167 Forum Online Help. Harvey searched the forum's magic encyclopedia, but could find no information on the formula for demonic enhancement elixirs or soul melting or the encyclopedia, still in the data compilation and upload phase, hadn't been officially released to all forum members. Access had been granted only to the 3 new members of the union, allowing them to work tirelessly to complete the tedious data upload process. Perhaps Mr. Burning Overlord, the union's leader, had a stereotype about the spellcaster forum, subconsciously assuming that all members were at least high-level spellcasters. Consequently, all publicly uploaded research documents contained extremely profound, high-level knowledge, some even originating from ancient alien texts, untranslated. This was a complete madcap excursion into Harvey's knowledge, leaving him with the terrifying illusion of entering a dragon's vault but unable to take home a single glittering gold coin. Theoretical explanation of element control and modern magic system, advanced comparative experiment of transformation spells and ancient illusions, hypothesis on the application of shadow magic and the construction of 9-ring model, thoughts on the magic resistance cracking of defensive radiant magic. Harvey flipped through the dazzled profound knowledge in the magic encyclopedia, and for the first time he truly felt that his originally smart brain was not enough. The people in the Federation are truly honest. Can't they upload some easy-to-understand basic theories? Or even a few mid-level spells I can copy and learn, as Dallin, who sat beside him and also possessed a magic brain and assisted Harvey in reviewing the forum information, couldn't help but chuckle. Sir, they assume the forum is full of powerful, high-level spellcasters. If they upload too much low-level magical knowledge, the forum administrators might mistakenly think they are being perfunctory and dismissive of their cooperation. Harvey, through his frequent communications with the Scorching Lord, knew that the Federation was deeply committed to collaborating with the Spellcaster Forum. When he, as administrator Turing, publicly announced the launch of the online magic encyclopedia at a regular meeting, forum members representing Elven and Dwarven backgrounds expressed strong approval and interest. Most progressive spellcasters of the new era had long disliked the traditional, conservative wizarding clan system. While obtaining this advanced magical knowledge from the forum's magic encyclopedia also requires a hefty price, a significant amount of forum points, the current forum point earning system is well established. Full members simply need to attend a weekly spellcaster exchange meeting on time to receive a guaranteed 10 points. In the information exchange and anonymous consignment sections, rare magical materials, advanced spells, and unique secret knowledge can be sold in exchange for points, effectively accumulating points quickly. However, high-level spellcasters are often lavish, leading to both high point earning and high point spending. For example, the recently released Tower of Magic adventure game has fascinated many members, with some already investing hundreds of points simply to climb the tower letterboards and draw powerful spell cards. Many members also frequently use the forum's instant teleportation service. While the points spent on a single transaction may not be significant, they accumulate over time and can become a significant expense. Harvey had recently noticed, through his surreptitious observations of the forum backend, that the points accumulated by most members had been steadily decreasing, even reaching rock bottom. Only a few, like the legendary spellcasters Scorching Lord and Shadow Knight, were still managing to maintain triple-digit points, while the vast majority of the remaining members were practically depleted. The launch of an online magic encyclopedia at this time was a perfect opportunity. No points? No problem. Trade in your literature, research papers, and precious spells. Phil Holden, codenamed Son of Flame, was one of the forum poor Harvey considered a key target. Ever since becoming addicted to the virtual adventure game Tower of Magic, his daily verbal battles with his arch-enemy, the Frost Giant, quickly shifted from information exchange to a fierce battle for the top 3 spots in the game rankings. After discovering that spell cards obtained from the Magic Tower could be freely traded on the forum, Phil went to great lengths, spending a significant amount of points and resorting to coercion and bribery to obtain several powerful purple spell cards from members he had close relationships with, such as Spell Shield, Astrologer, and Elemental Hand. This helped him rocket to 3rd place in the monthly Tower Climb leaderboard, just behind Kilthuzid and the Scorching Lord, who had held the top 2 spots, and pushing the Frost Giant, who had previously held 3rd place, down. The excitement was naturally followed by a sense of emptiness, especially when the number representing his member ID, representing points, dropped to the single digits, which made him even more anxious. Therefore, he planned to spend all of his time today poring over the forum's news section, searching for trading categories posted by other members to see if there were any opportunities to earn points. Huh? Someone's actually asking about a demonic flesh and blood elixir on the forum. Fel frowned, puzzled. Logically speaking, a combat spellcaster registered with the Federation, having reached a high level, would have undoubtedly experienced rotational missions in the Evil Moon Mountains, thus undoubtedly having encountered ordinary demon cavalry or spell-casting priests. They would undoubtedly be well aware that demon warriors possess a special flesh-strengthening secret potion that requires regular intake to maintain their combat prowess. Only research-focused spellcasters, who spend their days secluded in their mage towers, never leaving the main entrance, and rarely engage in in-depth discussions with other spellcasters, would be completely unaware of this. I didn't expect this Mr. Kilthusen to be such a nerdy, introverted researcher in real life. Thinking of how he had previously cowered and remained silent during their exploration of the leyline, Feld suddenly felt that his online persona matched his real-life identity, and he couldn't help but chuckle. Damn it. He's a top-tier player in the Magic Tower game, with his powerful punches, but in real life, he's a timid, silent idiot who hasn't even been to a demon battlefield. Ha ha ha, war intelligence involving the demons wasn't something that had to be kept secret. The Union and the Wizarding Alliance were eager to share it, as it was practically the demon's fatal weakness. Fel immediately perked up and began typing away. Replying to the other party's questions, Son of Flame, we've already obtained detailed information on the demon's secret flesh-blood elixir used to strengthen their soldiers' physiques, even before the war between the two races broke out. This information is almost semi-public within the Union and the Wizarding Kingdom. Perhaps because you're not a member of the Union, you've never been privy to it. The demons need a rare magical mineral called melting spirit ore to concoct their flesh-blood elixir. Currently, this mineral is only found in the core area of a large, naturally formed magic stone vein north of the Divine Spine Mountains. It's a mysterious mineral that appears crystalline but contains a liquid substance. After the demons mine these soul-melting ores, they fuse them with the flesh and blood of demon beasts according to the appropriate ratio. Then, using a special device called a blood-calling instrument, they transform them into potions, which are then sealed and stored in sealed containers. Furthermore, when demon soldiers use these potions, they don't ingest them directly. Instead, they inject them directly into their bodies through metal probes, allowing them to absorb the potion's properties directly. This is something we discovered and observed at great cost. Chapter 168 Controlled Experiment. Harvey successfully obtained information about a demonic bloodline strengthening potion from forum member Son of Flame. His only regret was that the Federation had yet to crack or obtain the formula. The formula, a secret passed down by the demons for centuries, had been tested by injection on death row prisoners. The subject's flesh and blood disintegrated instantly, resulting in a gruesome death. This proved the profound difference between demons and humans in terms of physique, and the strengthening potion suitable for them could never be replicated on humans. However, Harvey discerned a key piece of information from the long conversation. The soul-melting ore originates from the core area of a large, naturally occurring demonic stone vein. It is a strange, liquid magical mineral. It's identical to the demon spirit, a magical creature previously captured for Mr. Heart Demon, who resides in the demonic web space. Even the energy-absorbing beetle, which Harvey had accidentally discovered and brought him great benefits, is extremely similar. Beetles also live near large, natural veins of magic stone, while demon spirits inhabit the crimson pipes of the magic network, brimming with pure magic energy. Despite their diverse properties, they share one fundamental similarity: they are all natural companions of the magic stone veins. A thought suddenly struck Harvey, one that even he found absurd. Could it be that the demon soldiers' injections aren't some secret blood-strengthening potion at all, but are actually pure liquid magic energy extracted from these magic stone companions? Harvey had Reiner retrieve the living demon spirit that Mr. Inner Demon had recently captured, along with a spherical water droplet of liquid magic energy it inhabited, for a control experiment. This experiment was inspired by the hypothesis provided by the Son of Flame regarding the composition of the demon blood strengthening potion. The living demon spirit Mr. Inner Demon had captured and delivered was in a languid state. This was because, after emerging from the demonic web into the real world, the liquid magic energy stored in the tiny water droplet it inhabited had been gradually depleted, much like the oxygen content of water in a fish tank. Within a few days, it would slowly suffocate from lack of magic energy. Reiner deftly peeled the demon spirit from the water droplet with the metal tentacles attached to his back, then used the hollow metal probe to extract all the liquid magic energy from the droplet. Harvey approached the captured demonic blood-calling device and directed Reiner to quickly transfer the demon spirit and liquid into a transparent cover topped with a spherical crystal. Then, through the energy pipes connected to the energy-focusing array, he forcibly activated the demonic device. As a gentle energy surge emanated from the instrument, Harvey could see through the crystal cover at the top. The living demon spirit and liquid magic energy were rapidly disintegrated by the engraved array within the instrument, quickly merging into translucent, irregular mass that slowly floated within the crystal cover. Reiner immediately retrieved an empty energy tank and placed it directly into the recess beneath the instrument, fitting it seamlessly into the groove of the base. The energy-gathering array hummed rhythmically, continuously feeding energy into the array engraved on the worn blood-summoning instrument. Quickly drawing the entire suspended translucent mass into the tank below. Harvey eagerly removed the tank and gently shook it, finding it had indeed been refilled with liquid. He had successfully replicated a substance suspected of possessing the same properties as the bloodline strengthening potion, without a formula. Next, he needed to test Harvey's hypothesis by testing the potion on living subjects. Unfortunately, during the small-scale raid on the mining area, the Northern Army suffered dozens of casualties, visibly infuriating them. Without Harvey's prior request for prisoners, and with Pierce's tacit approval, all surviving severely wounded demon soldiers were beheaded on the spot, leaving no survivors. The custom of stacking severed heads to show off their might to the alien enemies on the battlefield was a unique post-battle ritual of the Northern Army, a tradition that had been popular since the River Valley Outposts battles against the fell orcs. Only then did Harvey realize his regrets. If he wanted to secure another living demon soldier, he would probably have to turn his sights to the Evil Moon Mountains, thousands of miles away. The common fighting style of demon soldiers was to fight to the death. Even when surrounded and desperate, they desperately sought to utilize their innate ability of flesh and blood explosion to perish alongside the enemy. Even if they managed to capture a survivor, they would either succumb quickly to their wounds or, lacking consistent replenishment of strengthening potions, gradually experience withdrawal symptoms, ultimately leading to their inevitable death. The reason Harvey's Northern Army soldiers avoided the suicide truck-like attack during the mining battle was due to their good fortune in encountering this isolated demonic force. All of them were weakened by a prolonged lack of potion replenishment, leaving their drug levels too low to allow them to unleash such a terrifying self-destructive attack. This was also the main reason why the large number of demon captives captured by the human race during the decades-long war between the two races in the Evil Moon Mountains could never be sold to the southern kingdoms. However, for a research-oriented spellcaster like Harvey, occasionally needing to use a demon captive as a subject for magical research experiments is not difficult to do, especially now that he has a friendly and anonymous relationship with the Union. Shadow Knight, Mr. Kilthuzid, you want a living demon test subject? I can find one easily. However, I must warn you in advance that they are generally missing limbs and in a dying state due to lack of potions. They wouldn't survive your experiments, let alone survive for more than a few days. Shadow Knight, are you sure you want to buy this kind of crappy test subject? I'm embarrassed to even take your points. I'll give it to you for free, as long as you pay the exorbitant cost of the living creature teleportation. The Spellcaster Forum had long since officially opened online services for the instantaneous teleportation of living creatures and large amounts of cargo. However, the high point requirement meant few forum members ventured into the service, resulting in Harvey's limited profits. A single teleportation fee of 50 points, plus an additional 1,000 gold pounds for instant delivery, was enough to launch a bounty for knowledge sharing on high-level spells in the forum's information exchange section. Harvey, of course, didn't mind the expense. It was simply a matter of transferring money from one hand to the other. So, the next day, he quickly received a delivery of a living creature from the Blackstone Fortress in the Evil Moon battlefield. Sure enough, it's missing an arm and a leg. It's missing exactly one arm and a leg, Harvey exclaimed as he watched a demon soldier emerge from the large teleportation array, tightly bound with chains and a cloth bag over his head. Reiner, wielding the metal tentacles behind him, tossed the crippled demon, trapped like a dumpling, onto the lab table and secured it with a buckle. He peeled off the hood, revealing that the creature's crimson eyes had gradually taken on the dark yellow of near death. His once throbbing muscles had shriveled as if dehydrated, and his scales and skin were dull and lifeless. Reiner quickly warned Harvey, "My lord, it looks like he won't survive the night. I remember Mr. Asdalin saying that when a demon runs out of medicine and enters a weakened state, their eyes gradually change color. In the dying state, their deep crimson turns a disgusting dark yellow, like suppuration." Harvey waved him off. He'd soon be testing his haphazardly copied strengthening potion on him anyway. He might die instantly after the injection, never making it past the night. Chapter 169 Paper Submission, Anti-Magic Weapon Research. To perk up his experimental subject, Harvey summoned Egno, who was busy at the infirmary, and had him use a mid-level healing technique to briefly revitalize the crippled demon. Since being captured, the demon had clearly received none of the basic care expected of a high-level intelligent being. Even the wounds from his severed limbs had healed on their own, relying on their own immense vitality. The Union's battle mages hadn't even bothered to bandage his wounds. Even more inhumane, as if to silence his wailing, the battle mages plunged an unknown weapon into his mouth, thrashing around, crushing his sharp teeth and tongue until he was completely muffled, unable to utter a single sound other than a grunt. Harvey felt no pity for the demon. Battles between different species were inherently brutal. If a human spellcaster had been captured by the demons, they'd probably have been stuffed into a monster's stomach as rations for their mount, which would have been considered a form of gentle treatment. The hybrid elf's natural healing magic restored a small measure of vitality to the dying demon, but it lasted only a quarter of an hour before the weakened reaction from drug withdrawal brought him back to the lab table, his bloodied mouth opening and closing like a dying fish out of water. Harvey fetched a metal probe and a glass injection tube crafted by Egno. He combined them and extracted more than half of the replica enhancement potion from the energy tank, handing it to Reiner, who was in charge of the experiment. "Give it 2 injections, one into his veins and one intramuscularly." Reiner clamped the syringe with his metal tentacles, turned, and restrained the terrified demon. Ignoring his final, dying struggles, he steadily completed Harvey's experimental instructions. Pulling the empty syringe from the demon's sturdy thigh, Harvey and Reiner stood side by side, observing the demon's reaction closely under the illumination of the illuminating magic stone. After a little over a minute, the dying demon opened his mouth, a searing sigh erupting from deep within his throat. Then, his pupils, once a pus-filled, dark yellow, gradually faded, returning to vibrant crimson. His once atrophied muscles gradually plumped up, even the barely visible blood vessels beneath his skin bulged slightly, and his once dehydrated, wrinkled skin regained its luster. It's really working," Reiner exclaimed in disbelief, instinctively turning to look at Harvey. "Sir, your haphazardly concocted potion has actually revitalized this creature." It was unbelievable. Over decades of battle, the Federation had captured and seized countless demon warriors and their energy tanks, yet no one had ever successfully cracked the formula for this bloodline strengthening potion. But on second thought, Harvey found this to be reasonable. Battle mages, focused solely on improving their own spells and increasing their rank, wouldn't harbor any interest in such a path of research that ultimately benefits them. Furthermore, inactive research casters wouldn't expend vast sums of money, materials, and energy on thoroughly exploring the secrets of alien races. It would be far better to devote their time to improving and analyzing several more spell matrices. Of course, Harvey's tireless efforts in this experiment weren't solely driven by curiosity. The most important purpose of his own replica of the demon strengthening potion was to confirm his previous hypothesis. The demon soldiers weren't using secret bloodline strengthening potions, but rather pure liquid magic energy extracted from the byproducts of the magic stone or veins. Magic energy could actually be injected directly into the bodies of intelligent beings, directly strengthening their bloodlines and physical abilities. Harvey was already hesitant to consider the implications of this revelation. The Blood Night Awakening ritual, originating from the Church of Light, and the demonic method of magical energy injection are undoubtedly connected. The former utilizes powerful ancient magical creatures as ingredients to create a bloodline potion, awakening innate talents. Essentially, this is a process of absorbing the remaining magical energy within the magical creatures, but with the addition of numerous other ingredients, combined with a ritual to neutralize the potent properties of the pure magical energy, lest the awakening fail and result in the participant's immediate death. However, the demons, with their naturally robust constitutions, have clearly abandoned this cumbersome and costly awakening method in favor of a more direct and crude method of magical energy injection, still using the flesh and blood of magical creatures to neutralize the supposedly violent properties. Could it be that the church deliberately introduced this method to the alien races? Did the demons, after obtaining the formula, simply and crudely refine the process? Of course, the truth could very well be the other way around, that the demons first invented this primitive and barbaric method of strengthening, and that the church somehow stole the formula, leading to the current awakening of the Bloodline Knights. Whatever the truth, Harvey, as a spellcaster, loathed both the demons and the church equally. No. Compared to the demons, who brazenly launched a war between the two races and directly invaded human territory, Harvey felt a subtle aversion to the glorious church, which boasted a vast number of ordinary believers but had persecuted spellcasters for centuries on charges of heresy and blasphemy. This thought stirred in his heart, and he couldn't help but harbor the idea of revenge, killing two birds with one stone. The demons, injecting magic energy to enhance their soldiers' combat effectiveness. The church, the true formula for the Bloodline Awakening ritual. Reiner. Bring me your lab record book. From now on, I'll dictate what you're doing. Reiner nodded, perplexed, and decisively pulled his thick lab record book from his waist pouch. Holding a quill with a metal tentacle, he began rapidly recording Harvey's experimental results and research report on the similarities between demonic bloodline strengthening potion and the church's Bloodline Awakening ritual. If this research document, detailing the experimental process and results, passes the Union's review and evaluation, and is officially published in the Union's bulletin, which is circulated throughout the southern continent, Harvey couldn't help but wonder what disgusted expressions the priests and bishops of the church would have upon reading it. Harvey looked forward to it. However, publishing a research document that disgusted the church wasn't the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal of this tedious live-action controlled experiment was to develop an anti-demon weapon to counter the demon's drug-induced enhancements. He had already rehearsed the entire subsequent experimental process. Since demons directly absorb pure magic energy to enhance themselves, wouldn't the energy-absorbing beetles, naturally endowed with this ability, be a primeval enemy against their abundant mana? If the energy-absorbing beetles' souls were transferred to create a magical alchemical weapon similar to the magic gun, with only slight adjustments to its activation and operation, a portable alchemical device could be created that, instead of firing magical bullets, directly drained the demon's magic energy. Once mass-produced and distributed to the demon battlefields of the Evil Moon Mountains, allowing battle mages with inherently powerful spellcasting abilities to wield them, perhaps it would truly be possible to completely contain the demon offensive within the Evil Moon Mountains, perhaps even counterattack to the north side of the Evil Moon Mountains, invading demon territory never before explored by humans. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170 An Anonymous Paper. A Layer, the Skyrealm Magic Tower. In a room on the middle floor of the floating magic tower, 3 magic brain instruments sat neatly arranged on a long table before 3 high-level spellcasters, all dressed in dark, standard mage robes with 3 silver decorative stripes embroidered on the cuffs. They had been personally appointed by the Union's chief mage, the legendary mage Chemo Salas, to join the mysterious magic web spellcaster forum and to organize and upload the Union's internal documentation to the online magic encyclopedia. This task required constant, time-consuming work. Even though all 3 of them could use a modified version of the mage's hand to perform the most tedious typing, simply sorting through the endless stream of precious documents consumed all their energy and time, aside from their daily meals, restrooms, and meditation. Of course, these 3 also clearly bore the typical appearance of research-oriented spellcasters who worked long hours at the Union, slightly thinning hair. Larry, how much of the documents delivered today are still to be entered? The spellcaster in charge of reviewing the documents stared at the documents in his hands without looking up. There's another batch coming in later, so hurry up. The mage named Larry straightened up, stretched himself, and prepared to relax on the sofa, asking the waiter to bring a cup of black tea. Rodney, Hunter, are you 2 really not going to join us for some tea and a break? The spellcaster named Hunter had the most hair loss of the 3 and was the most diligent in reviewing and entering the documents. He ignored his colleagues' invitations, insisting on reviewing and organizing the last batch of documents in his possession. Then he logged into the spellcaster forum and typed word by word to complete the entry into the magic encyclopedia. This was because the paper was from his mentor, the legendary mage Soren Dawson, one of the 3 chief wizards of the Union. Hunter meticulously completed the paper he'd received from his advisor, then subconsciously flipped through it. He'd uploaded all the papers he'd uploaded that morning, a whopping 20. Wait? 20. No, why was there one extra? He rubbed his eyes and flipped through it again, counting silently. Indeed, there was one extra. Larry, Rodney. Something is wrong. There is suddenly an extra paper in the forum's magic encyclopedia. Larry, who was half lying on the sofa sipping the black tea in his hand, curled his lips and said casually without much care, "Maybe you are dazzled, or maybe you entered one too many." "Don't be so surprised," Rodney also echoed. "The documents delivered to us each day are a fixed 20 copies. How could there be an extra one? You didn't count yesterday's share into today's workload." Hunter shook his head firmly and denied decisively, "Absolutely impossible. I am different from you. After entering the day's information every day, I will cut into a separate document catalog as a counting separator." Found it. This suddenly extra paper, he suddenly shouted loudly, scaring the 2 colleagues next to him. No wonder I felt that the title and signature of this document were wrong. I had no impression of it at all. A research report on the similarities between the demon blood strengthening potion and the church's blood awakening ceremony. Hunter's mouth dropped open in shock at the bizarre title. What kind of bizarre research direction was this? Demonic strengthening potions? Church bloodline awakening rituals? Similarity research? As a high-level research spellcaster within the Union, Hunter had successfully published several constructive papers, both individually and collaboratively. One of his papers had even been selected for publication in the Union Bulletin, receiving widespread acclaim. He knew better than anyone that when publishing research findings, the direction must be both theoretical and empirical, relying not solely on conjecture or unfounded speculation. Otherwise, the paper wouldn't even pass the initial review of the academic research department and would be rejected, often accompanied by a sneering critique. After all, most spellcasters were mortals with mortal desires, prone to greed and jealousy, as well as stubbornness and narrow-mindedness. While being able to independently publish a valuable paper was certainly rewarding, the greater psychological satisfaction came from confronting critics and directly refuting the research of others. Upon hearing that an unknown paper had suddenly appeared on the forum, Hunter's 2 colleagues were immediately excited and hurried to his magic brain device. "Is there really a new paper? Open it and take a look." Could it be some forum member trying to use the spellcaster forum as a shortcut to get their paper published? Hunter opened the article, not bothering to read the contents in detail. Instead, he scrolled to the bottom to check the author's signature. Kilthuzid? Is that a forum member's code name, or is it a real name registered with the Union? Larry beckoned an assistant and coldly instructed, "Go to the office and see if there's a Mr. Kilthuzid among the Union's registered spellcasters." "Just look in the directory of high-level spellcasters." Hunter raised his hand and released his manipulating hand. 3 ethereal, flexible arms, each holding an ink-drenched quill, began to quickly copy the paper onto white paper. HMPH, an anonymous member of the Spellcaster Forum secretly slipped a copy of their research paper into the Federation's document database through the forum. "That's a pretty good shortcut," Larry scoffed, clearly expressing his disapproval. For an orthodox spellcaster to publish a paper through the Federation, they must undergo a 3-stage review and evaluation process. First, the paper must be sent to the academic research department for a preliminary review, which is also the longest stage. After passing the preliminary review, the paper will be assigned to the intermediate review committee responsible for that particular school of magic, based on its research focus. 12 reviewers will take turns deliberating, and only a majority vote will it be submitted to the final review department. A unanimous approval from all 12 reviewers signifies that the paper is extremely groundbreaking or of research value, and it will then be submitted to the 3 Federation presidents for final evaluation. Only papers that receive positive reviews from the presidents are eligible for publication in the Federation Bulletin, enjoying the acclaim and honor of the magic community. After waiting for the manipulation hand to transcribe the paper, the 3 high-level spellcasters each took a copy and began reading. Silence returned to the room for a moment, broken only by the gentle rustling of pages. Pure magical energy exists in 3 different forms in the real world: liquid, gaseous, and solid. Natural magic stone represents the solid state, the magical web energy drawn through meditation represents the gaseous state, mimicry, and the magical energy converted by the demon race's specially crafted blood summoning instruments exists in liquid form. The demon race collects spirit ore, converts it into liquid form through instruments, and directly injects it to strengthen their flesh and blood. Through experiments, it has been definitively demonstrated that pure magical energy can be directly applied to the demon race, enhancing their various physical abilities. The Church of Light's Bloodline Night Awakening Potion also utilizes magical biomaterials rich in pure magical energy, enabling the subjects who take it to experience the effects of strengthening their flesh and blood and improving their physical fitness. In essence, it bears a great resemblance to the demon race's method of directly injecting pure magical energy into the body. Chapter 171 Chief's Personal Trial. On the top floor of the Sky Domain Magic Tower, a windowless room, overflowing with books and piles of paperwork, seemed incredibly crowded and cluttered, making it impossible to even stand. The legendary wizard, Soren Dawson, a short man with a comically red nose, huddled on the room's sole sofa, lost in thought over an ancient magical tome. As the only old-school, research-oriented spellcaster among the Union's 3 chiefs, his primary focus in recent years has been on analyzing and deciphering the hidden magical knowledge passed down by ancient wizards. The windowless, dim room was illuminated only by a magical stone lamp suspended beside his ear. This lamp, quite remarkable, shifted its angle to match Dawson's reading posture, ensuring ample light for his reading, regardless of his movements. A strange, pupilless face suddenly appeared on the ceiling. Its features moved rapidly, a fawning expression etched on its face. Mr. Dawson, your most beloved student is anxiously rushing to your study. Dawson paused, then exclaimed in surprise, Who? Is it Bowles? Has he returned from Black Rock City? The face's fawning smile froze for a moment, and after a mock cough, it slowly said, Oh, it's another of your students, the most diligent. Hunter. Dawson raised his hand to pinch his rosacea, uttered a hum with obvious disappointment, and returned his gaze to his books, falling silent. Half a minute later, the sound of rapidly approaching footsteps echoed outside the room. Someone whispered a few words to the waiter at the door, then gently knocked on Dawson's door. Come in. Hunter, I know it's you. Hunter quietly pushed the door open and slipped in, then politely greeted his teacher. The old man, Dawson, waved his hand without even looking up and casually asked, Aren't you assigned to enter documents for the Spellcaster Forum? Why are you here with me instead of working in the secretarial office? Hunter pulled a sheaf of papers from his pocket and, with slightly trembling hands, handed them to his advisor, his voice straining with suppressed excitement. Advisor, please take a look at this paper. It suddenly appeared in the Magic Encyclopedia's archives today while I was working at the Spellcaster Forum. Huh? Suddenly appeared? Dawson frowned, sensing something was amiss. A forum member was attempting to insert a paper into the published archive without the Federation's approval? What could this mean? He casually took the document and quickly scanned it. Demon Enhancement Potion, Church Bloodline Awakening Ritual. Application of Liquid Mana. Wow. Dawson, previously nonchalant, quickly scanned the paper's abstract, which had clearly been abridged by Hunter, and a look of surprise suddenly crossed his face. He carefully reread it as if to confirm it, then couldn't help but stand up from the sofa, glaring at his students and demanding, Hey, where's the full text of this paper? Did you bring it? Are the control test results and corresponding experimental data attached? Hunter nodded quickly, pulled the complete version of the paper from his pocket, and handed it back to his advisor. Dawson glanced at him resentfully, muttering, Couldn't you just give me the main text from the beginning? Why did you have to go through all this nonsense? Hunter could only grimace and weep inwardly. Everyone knew that his advisor, Mr. Dawson, was the most impatient president of the Federation. To avoid wasting his precious time reading papers that might be considered trash, he always compiled a simplified summary of the documents he was given for review. Dawson spent a full half hour, sometimes flipping through quickly, sometimes pausing to raise his hand and summon a tome with an old cover from the pile. It hovered in front of him, automatically unfolding its pages without a breeze, allowing him to compare the paper with a book. A highly perceptive and inquisitive paper, worthy of further analysis and research. Dawson snapped his fingers, closing the pile of reference books floating beside him, returning them to their original positions. He clutched the thin paper, less than 10 pages, his expression shifting. Hunter, however, had already silently memorized his impromptu comment. It would likely be one of the key comments he would include at the end of the paper after it was published in the Gazette. Dawson sighed softly. Salas is right. We have always been too focused on ourselves in the way of magic and have completely ignored the research and exploration of other intelligent races around us. This is also the biggest shortcoming of our short-lived race, arrogance and arrogance. He quickly rolled up the paper and stuffed it into his arms. Hunter, temporarily notify the other 2 members who are responsible for entering documents into the forum to suppress the matter of this paper for the time being and not publicize it. Hunter was stunned. Mentor, this paper does not need to go through the academic research department. Dawson rolled his eyes at him. You rushed to me, aren't you thinking of directly bypassing their review? He suddenly paused as he spoke, and abruptly took out the paper from his arms and opened it again to read. Wait. Did you copy the author's signature of the paper? Which member of the forum is it? Hunter said quickly. It's a high-level spellcaster named Cthuzid. We don't have the authority to view the forum's member list, so we're not sure whether he is a member of the forum, but I have checked the list of high-level spellcasters registered with the Federation in advance, and there is no relevant information about this person. Idiot. Of course you can't find his information. Cthuzid is just his code name in the forum, not his real name at all. After saying that, without waiting for Hunter to explain further, he immediately left the study and went to the advanced magic laboratory located on the middle floor of the Mage Tower in the Sky Domain, which was dedicated to the Chief of the Federation. Hunter stared longingly at his mentor, causing Dawson to soften his heart before leaving. Alright, come with me. Let's go find Sarath and replicate the control experiment mentioned in the paper to verify his findings. The Mage Tower in the Sky Realm had indeed delivered a number of demons suitable for live experiments. However, due to the long distance, the Federation had to use expensive flying griffins to transport them to Alea before their vitality was exhausted. As a result, only spellcasters with higher status in the Federation were allowed to freely use demons as experimental subjects. Also, those blood summoning devices they mentioned repeatedly in their paper. We just happen to have seized several of them. I think they are gathering dust in the Sky Realm treasury. Send someone to deliver them to the lab. Chapter 172 The Lie Given by the Blood God. Being able to personally witness the magical experiments of the Union's 2 legendary chiefs was a precious opportunity coveted by all Union spellcasters. Hunter sighed inwardly. Luckily, his other 2 colleagues, fearing to disturb Mentor Dawson, hadn't dared to submit this strange, anonymous paper. He had been coaxed into coming, relying on his status as his nominal student. Who knew he'd snagged such a huge advantage? It seemed fortune favored the brave. Well, even the brave under duress counted. When Hunter followed Mentor Dawson to the magic laboratory in the Sky Domain Mage Tower, a high-ranking alchemist permanently stationed with the Union was already waiting there, carrying a blood-calling device. This was his first time entering this experimental hall, accessible only to the chief archmage. The laboratory occupied an entire floor of the tower, with a half-height platform in the center, enclosed by a crystal shield encased in a protective array. Inside, lab tables and numerous alchemical devices were displayed. Metal energy wires and glass tubes formed a bizarre experimental circuit system, connecting numerous rare magical devices, presenting a strange and mysterious beauty. The door on the other side of the laboratory hall suddenly opened, and three identical chiefs, Saris, walking side by side, hurried into the lab. Dawson, I've seen the paper you sent. Are you planning to replicate the transmutation experiment detailed in the paper? Then, use it on demonic experimental receptors to verify their research. If successful, it would directly disprove the Church of Light's absurd claim of a divine gift of blood. The 3 Salis chiefs spoke almost simultaneously, each delivering a completely different message. Their resonant, deep voices echoed through the hall, causing Hunter to feel a sudden tingling and dizziness, his body swaying slightly. This wasn't intentional on the part of the chief archmage. Hunter had vaguely heard from rumors circulating within the Union that Chief Saris had accidentally failed to analyze a unique 9-ring technique years ago, resulting in severe damage to the magic pattern. This was a trauma affecting the soul. Although the legendary spellcaster's immense power had healed the damaged part of his soul, the after effects were that he would occasionally manifest multiple personalities due to fluctuations in his mental power and the dissipation of his magical energy. Dawson was no stranger to his old friend's occasional mental dissociation. He extended his palms and gently pressed the crystal cover of the experimental platform, causing it to rapidly vibrate and ripple. Then, he suddenly passed through the cover and entered it. He said solemnly through the cover, "The others can just watch from outside. This experiment, I and Sarath will conduct personally, with the exception of Hunter." The other waiters and the lab assistant, a mid-level spellcaster, immediately and consciously left the lab hall. After all, Legendary spellcaster's undisclosed experiments were strictly prohibited to anyone other than his students and disciples. After everyone had left, Hunter immediately and prudently took out his experimental record booklet and a magic stone used to record the experiment footage, and used his manipulator hand to fix it on the lab table. The Saras took steps in unison. 3 illusory figures overlapping as they vanished and flashed directly to the experimental table within the crystal enclosure. Without further ado, they urged, "Alright, let's get started." Dawson began to work, glancing at Hunter, who was watching intently from outside the crystal enclosure, and whispered, "In the Radiant Church's canon, the transformation of the Blood Knights of the Judgment Army is described as a ritual in which they pray to their gods for the power of their bloodline. The demonic bloodline strengthening method, however, is extremely crude and direct. They utilize soul-melting ore in the flesh of magical beasts, 2 naturally occurring substances rich in magical energy, to create a potion that is directly injected into ordinary demon soldiers. Therefore, we have every reason to hypothesize that no specific ritual is actually necessary. The flesh and blood of magical creatures in a natural environment, or the magical substances within their bodies, can inherently neutralize the violent nature of pure magic energy, allowing the magic energy to be directly injected into the organism, strengthening its bloodline and constitution." Sarath chuckled. "If that's the truth, then the theories the church promotes are ridiculous." As they chatted casually, their hands worked relentlessly on their experiments. With the swift, steady movements of several mages, they methodically followed the experimental procedures described in the anonymous paper, completing the process of extracting the liquid magical substance from the soul-melting ore. Then, they quickly disassembled the blood-summoning device, copied and reproduced the engraved magic array inscriptions within, and reassembled it as a new device. The magical beast flesh used in this replication experiment was sourced directly from the magical vault of the Sky Realm, the viscera of a captive giant ice bear. This was to closely resemble the magical creatures unique to the north, which the demons often used in their potions. The liquid substance from the soul-melting ore and the giant bear's viscera were quickly placed into the fusion chamber of the blood-summoning instrument. Salus lightly touched the top of the instrument with his fingertips, injecting a massive amount of magical energy into it, instantly activating it. A potion storage tank, commonly used by demons, had been pre-installed underneath, and it quickly filled with an unknown liquid as the instrument operated. The steps and materials should be fine. After all, the paper doesn't require a specific species of demonic beast. Dawson removed the tank and gently swirled the liquid inside. The laboratory door opened again, and 2 assistants quickly entered, pushing a metal stretcher. Tightly bound with leather straps was a frail demon soldier. This was one of the demon captives they had recently brought to Alea. He hadn't been through the potion withdrawal period for long, and wasn't yet dying. "No need to waste time, Hunter. Get a metal syringe with a probe." Dawson pressed a button on the lab bench, and the protective crystal cover immediately rose and opened. He tossed the energy tank into the arms of the frantic student and urged, "You'll complete the final step of the experiment. This way, you'll be witnessing this historic moment, exposing the church's hypocrisy and lies." Hunter trembled as he fetched the syringe and filled the tank with the liquid. He then walked over to the demon, who, though weak, still struggled with crimson eyes. He plunged the syringe's probe directly into the swollen vein in his neck. His pupils dilated. The yellow pus spots that had appeared after drug withdrawal began to fade, his body temperature rose, and he looked like he was about to enter a frenzied battle mode. His atrophied muscles and dehydrated, wrinkled skin have recovered somewhat. "It seems the drug is working quickly." The demon's struggles intensified, and the buckles of his belt tightened, threatening to break at any moment. Seraph stood by, observing his reactions, and suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. See. Magic truly follows the will of nature, not the rules bestowed by the gods. The end and ultimate of magic is not the realm of the gods. Chapter 173 Paper Assessment, Creation and Subversion. In a lair, in the lounge atop the Mage Tower in the Sky Realm, Chemo Salas and Soren Dawson sat on their respective sofas, lost in thought. A full-length mirror inlaid with carved silver stood nearby. Ripples suddenly appeared on its surface, revealing the figure of a middle-aged man in a black robe. It was Wes Gallagher, one of the 3 chiefs of the Union, currently in the Evil Moon Mountains. Gallagher coughed softly, awakening his 2 old friends from their reverie. "I've received your message. I really want to return to Alea and see the results of this experiment for myself." Salas shook his head slightly, interrupting Gallagher's subsequent comments on the experiment. "Let's not talk about this experiment for now. Gallagher, What's the current situation in Black Rock City? The black-robed archmage rubbed the pitch-black ring on his finger and said lightly, after clearing out the church's cancer in the Evil Moon Mine, the Federation has sent spellcasters there to begin moving the believers who linger there, unsure of where to go, back to the city one by one. Dawson asked doubtfully, what about the remaining Judgment Army? Did they just let you take over the mine? Did they not react in any extreme way? Salas sneered. They are now convinced that this incident was caused by the emergence of corrupted believers, tempted by the devil, among the believers. They have completely lost trust in the believers in the mine. They are eager for us to take over this mess, while they evacuate the mine on their own before the Federation personnel arrive. According to Gallagher, the Church's forces, having lost their High Inquisitor and a number of Inquisition Knight officers, have returned to Black Rock City. They haven't proactively negotiated with the Union, nor have they mentioned the demon summoning incident in the mining area. It seems they're keeping this loss to themselves, unwilling to become further entangled with other factions. Dawson nodded in agreement, exchanged a glance with Seraph, and slowly said, if that's the case, should we still release the contents of this anonymous paper? The implication in his words was clear. Since the physical blow to the church had already taken effect, was it necessary to actively provoke public controversy through this paper? After all, no matter how fierce the struggle and game between the two sides in secret, the alliance agreement between the Federation and the Church has not been truly broken in public. The demons, as the number one enemy, are still watching covetously. If the Federation takes the initiative to overturn the table at this time, it may cause a series of uncontrollable consequences in the future. The room fell into a brief silence. Salas habitually stood up and walked to the window, saying in a low voice, the content of this paper not only intuitively exposes the hypocrisy and deception of the Church's faith, it also uses the simplest method to point out a new research direction for all spellcasters dedicated to magical research. This is a field of knowledge that we have actively ignored in the past because of our arrogance and conceit. Since the strengthening potions used by the demons to improve ordinary people are exactly the same as the method used by the Church to transform bloodline knights, it undoubtedly proves that the ubiquitous magic energy in the magic network cannot only be absorbed and utilized by spellcasters through meditation, but can also be indirectly transformed into form, extracted from various magical substances in the real world, and directly act on ordinary people without spellcasting talent, so that they can also transcend the mundane and advance to the extraordinary. All of this follows the world's most primal natural will and the laws of reality, and has nothing to do with so-called divine gifts. Salas smiled and said, the truly significant impact of this paper upon its publication will be to inform all spellcasters who understand its contents. Our path forward is not a blasphemous attempt to seize divine authority, but rather a path of wisdom that explores the essence of the world and the laws of nature. Across the 7 wizarding kingdoms, many spellcasting organizations and ancient wizarding families study magic while simultaneously worshipping the god of light. They firmly believe that the extraordinary power granted by magic necessarily involves divine authority and domain, thus finding a transcendental identity for their family's inherited spellcasting talent. This group also serves as a crucial link in the alliance between the Church and the Union's spellcasters, and they are the faction most reluctant to see the alliance crumble. Gallagher chuckled disdainfully, this paper will indeed shake the fragile spiritual beliefs of those diehards. Humph. It's just breaking the lie of the blood god's gift. It's like kicking the door to the realm of God that they preach. It's also a relief. I really want to see the expressions of Pope Zai and his cardinals after they know the results of this experiment. It must be wonderful. Dawson shook his head and said, don't forget the soul realm. That is the ultimate anchor for them to consolidate their belief in God. This is also an area that our current research has not been able to touch. They can completely push the power of the gods to the soul level. If we want to completely strike a blow against their public opinion in the secular world, we still have a long way to go, of course, as long as the beliefs of some of the shallow believers who are spellcasters can be shaken, and they can plant a seed of doubt in their hearts through the core theory vaguely revealed in this paper, and lead them to verify it through experiments themselves, the expected results will be achieved. The 3 chairpersons quickly reached a consensus on the matter. They unanimously approved the paper, bypassing the paper review committee and scheduling its publication in next month's Union Bulletin. Dawson rubbed his reddened nose and muttered, how are we supposed to evaluate and comment on anonymously signed papers? Do we need to contact the administrator, Mr. Turing, through the forum to learn the author's true identity? Gallagher glared at the elderly Dawson and complained, no. Even if it's published anonymously, it's better than having the identity made public. I don't want this anonymous forum member to be hounded by those mad dogs of the church. That would completely defeat our original purpose and would likely directly anger Mr. Turing." Salas nodded in agreement, casually grabbing a piece of white paper and a quill from the desk, releasing his mage hand and beginning to write rapidly. "Haha, since both of you feel that it's beneath your dignity and fairness to write a paper review for an anonymous author, then I'll do a separate paper review for this unknown genius. Without the need for the 3 chief authors to sign, a lot of controversy can be avoided, and the person in charge of publishing the bulletin can save a lot of subsequent troubles." Dawson and Gallagher turned away slightly embarrassedly, but their eyes couldn't help but glance at the text that Salas was writing quickly. A paper with a high degree of sensitivity and a spirit of exploration. "It's worth using as a reference for more in-depth analytical research." Dawson muttered a few words as Salas wrote, feeling that it was somewhat familiar. After a pause, he complained dissatisfiedly, "Salas, you let Enzo eavesdrop on my conversation with others again." Salas laughed and said, "Your casual comments are very pertinent. What's the harm in borrowing them? From magical minerals and organisms derived from nature, the 3 concrete forms of magic energy and reality were accurately explored. Combining bold conjectures with precise experiments, it perfectly replicated and cracked the secret of the alien bloodline strengthening method, and also provided an important reference for the research on the embodiment of magic energy, and broadened the caster's cognition and vision of the real application of magic energy." The paper reviewer, Kimo Salas. Chapter 174 The Secret of Alchemy. 3 days later, at dawn, the Quinn brothers strolled side by side, leisurely entering the Alchemy Exploration Society's headquarters in Alea. Compared to Alea's iconic floating magic tower, the Exploration Society headquarters, nestled in the city's south, was remarkably low-key, occupying less space than a secular prince's residence. If one overlooked the brass emblem atop the building's entrance, most would mistake it for a wealthy individual's villa or the offices of a major chamber of commerce. "Good morning, gentlemen," the Quinn brothers' assistants, already waiting by the door, hurried to greet the 2 men, their unprecedented simultaneous arrival. "Your student Mr. Chris Bird has sent you a letter from Daius, and the latest issue of this month's bulletin was just delivered from the Federation's publishing department today. Would you like to open the letter first or read the bulletin?" Offrey walked straight to the sofa in the chief lounge, sat down, pinched his brows, and asked in confusion, "Chris and the others have arrived in Daius? He should not be able to use the continental teleportation array with so many apprentices." Ed took the letter in black tea handed to him by the waiter, and said casually, "Maybe he is in a hurry to leave. He is very enthusiastic and eager for the alchemy laboratory prepared for him by the mysterious big man." According to the previous agreement, after Chris and his apprentices arrive in the wizard kingdom of Daius, they will be received by a special person from the branch of the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce established in Daius. After a short rest, they will be taken to the territory of the mysterious sponsor. Under the witness of the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce, they will directly sign a confidential magic contract, and will no longer have frequent written communications with the Exploration Society. Offred opened the letter from Chris and found it was indeed a simple note to his teacher, reporting his safety after arriving in Daius. He glanced at it briefly before casually tossing it on the coffee table. The waiter quickly handed the newly obtained bulletin to the 2 chiefs. Almost simultaneously, they opened the new issue of the Union Bulletin, intending to glance through it briefly before discussing its contents. Then, the brothers' gazes suddenly froze, their previously relaxed expressions frozen, their lips twitching rapidly as if they had suffered a stroke. "Chief? Chiefs," the waiter called softly several times, holding a refilled teacup. No response came, and he froze for a moment, unsure what to do. Ed stood up and sat down next to Offred. The 2 brothers huddled close together, simultaneously glancing at the pages of the bulletin. The first article on the front page was titled "A Research Report on the Similarities Between Demonic Bloodline Strengthening Potions and the Church's Bloodline Awakening Ritual." Author, Kilthuzid, anonymously published, a non-union registered spellcaster, magic level unknown. Time seemed to pause in the lounge until Ed's fingers, clutching the bulletin, suddenly trembled. He stiffly turned his head to look at his twin brother. "Offrey, if I remember correctly, Kilthuzid, isn't he the independent alchemist in the Spellcaster Forum who's always had a good relationship with us?" A few months ago, they had participated in a magical network roaming adventure together. He had been quite low-key and taciturn throughout the operation. The image of a typical autistic experimenter. Offord felt as if a piece of alchemical material had been stuck in his throat. He choked for a long time before finally uttering, he's always had a difficult situation. To collect experimental materials and save money, he even purchased scrap materials from the Exploration Society at a low price from us. How could he actually write such an experimental paper, personally reviewed by the Union chief and highly praised? The article did not directly publish the paper's content, but instead, for the first time, included the review comments of Union chief Chemo Salas. The large, bold font and the extremely high evaluation of the paper's value made it even more impactful. Highly perceptive and exploratory, groundbreaking and subversive, the Quinn brothers began to carefully read the main text of the document. The experimental descriptions made their hearts pound, blood rushed to their heads, and they argued fiercely. It truly lived up to the evaluation of the Union chief, a legendary spellcaster, but it was probably more than just groundbreaking and subversive. The two brothers looked at each other subconsciously and said in unison, "This is the key to open the realm of God." Then awfully suddenly shook his head violently and added decisively, "No. That is not the real realm of God. It is just a hypocritical lie that we imagined out of ignorance and was pinned on our heads by the church." He stood up excitedly and waved his hand to let all the waiters standing aside to leave the room. After closing the door, he turned around and walked to the desk, saying in a trembling voice, "What a bullshit blood gift. What divine power. Ha ha ha. Magical energy and real concrete matter can be completely neutralized and formulated like we mix alchemical magic potions, giving ordinary intelligent creatures extraordinary powers." Ed woke up from his dream and jumped up from the sofa. "That's right. No wonder they want to restrict the use of alchemical creations and magic potions on ordinary mortals. Aren't they afraid that we will discover this obvious secret? No, no, no. There is nothing wrong with what the Federation and the Church did on this point. If pure magic power is directly applied to mortals, their fragile flesh and blood will not be able to withstand it. This is why the demons need to incorporate the flesh and blood of magical creatures as auxiliary ingredients in the formula, and the awakening of the Blood Knights of the Church requires rituals." Overy became more and more excited as he spoke, and couldn't help laughing, but neither is the most perfect way of application. "Ed, have you noticed that the demon-strengthening potions will make their soldiers fall into a negative state of potion addiction, and the strength and blood ability cannot be solidified, and the Church? Ha ha ha. The blood awakeners who have been strengthened through rituals in the Church, and the blood warriors cultivated by secular nobles with potions, will quickly weaken their blood power as they age." Ed nodded like pounding garlic, fully understanding the hint in the words of his twin brothers. "Yes, logically speaking, if both those with bloodline gifts and spellcasters use magical energy to strengthen themselves and awaken their abilities, then why do spellcasters' magical powers grow stronger and more abundant with age, while those with bloodline gifts gradually weaken?" Awfully waved his hands repeatedly, signaling him not to speculate. Quick, quick. Have your assistants prepare the lab, and we need a live demon subject. We'll immediately replicate the experiment detailed in this paper to verify this idea." At that moment, they both had a single thought. What about the demonic enhancement formula passed down for millennia? What about the Church's secret method for cultivating bloodline knights? They were all deeply flawed, merely incomplete potion formulas enhanced by magical energy. To develop a truly perfect alchemical potion formula, one without any side effects, required the combined wisdom and adventurous spirit of an alchemist. Chapter 175 The Wave of Secular Public Opinion. The Papal States, the City of Grace, Gors. Cardinal Tassa Ismail stood at the doorway of the chapel, frowning slightly as he watched the cardinals gathered there engaged in a heated debate. "Everyone, please step back. His Majesty. I'm afraid he won't see you today." A high-level judge in a pure white robe stepped out from the crowd and said angrily, "Sir Ismail, are we just going to sit back and watch those heretical wizards of the Federation blaspheme our Lord so unscrupulously?" Another bishop with gold embroidered on the lapels of his white robe also stepped forward and whispered, "It wasn't long ago that high-level spellcasters brazenly attacked the Church's monastery in the Principality of Barclay. Now they are openly declaring that her bloodline divine gift ritual is from the same source as the evil secret medicine of the demon race." Someone in the crowd took over and said, "The demon summoning and believer corruption incidents in the evil moon mine. Who knows if these wizards also secretly acquiesced and condoned them?" Ismail looked around and found that those who took the initiative to protest were almost all high-level members of the Divine Punishment Church that he was familiar with. "What do you want?" With a demonic army pressing in, Do you want to renew the war with the Union and the 7 wizard kingdoms, washing away the shame with blood? The cardinal paused, his tone growing more stern. Or do you believe that, apart from those spellcasters, the priests, the inquisitors, and those powerless ordinary believers alone can keep the demons at the gates of Blackstone City, preventing them from even setting foot on human territory? Since the Church signed a non-aggression pact with the Union and the Wizard Kingdoms, while private friction and conflict persisted, they maintained a superficial peace, both to jointly resist the powerful alien enemy and to cooperate in their respective interests. The article published in the latest issue of the Union Bulletin was not complex or obscure. It objectively described how to use the demonic race's unique transformation device, magical substances rich in mana, and magical creatures to replicate the demonic bloodline strengthening potion with exactly the same effects. The paper began with a review from Federation Chief Chemo Salas. Ismail had met him several times in Black Rock City during his youth and was fully aware of him as a legendary spellcaster, passionate about sorcery and obsessed with seeking the ultimate path of magic. Since he dared to make such a comment, and even included the complete experimental process, materials, and design, the authenticity of the results was unquestionable, and there was no need to worry about others re-verifying them. The Pope's words echoed in Ismail's mind, gradually calming him down. Just a potion formula that simulates the bloodline-strengthening ritual makes you doubt the legitimacy of the divine gift? Mortals have always wanted to usurp the authority of the gods, and it has been like this for thousands of years. They have just groped their way to the gate of our Lord's holy kingdom, and you are so panicked and lost your composure? Aren't you the ones who really need to repent and pray, and reflect on why your faith is so unsteady? A few cardinals and presiding judges bowed their heads, closed their eyes and began to pray in a low voice. Most of the stubborn ones still held their heads high, gritting their teeth and saying, "Lies. Blasphemy. Depravity. We can no longer tolerate those evil extraordinary wizards. Your Holiness, please come out in person and prove to us the irrationality of these heresies. I want to meet His Holiness in person and ask him to directly condemn the Federation. The bloodline divine gift must never be questioned. Have we misunderstood our Lord's revelation?" The crowd erupted in anger. Ismail looked at the cardinals and higher-ranking judges, whose expressions varied, from bewildered to furious. Reluctantly, he raised his papal scepter and shouted, "Your Majesty has asked me to ask you, why are you wavering in your faith, seeking excuses to vent your shame and anger? Have you forgotten the revelations and teachings of our Lord? Have you forgotten the oracles clearly stated in the sacred texts you study daily? Our Lord's divine authority has never rested on mortal flesh, but on the souls of all living beings. Potions that strengthen blood and flesh aren't exclusive to the demons. The Alchemical Exploration Society, a research school more radical than the Union, has long publicized several alchemical drugs and devices that can enhance the caster's physique and transform the body. However, they are strictly regulated, and the Alliance Treaty strictly prohibits the use of these drugs and devices on ordinary mortals. Furthermore, over the course of centuries, the Church itself had continuously weakened the formulas for bloodline-strengthening rituals and secretly granted them to secular nobles aligned with the Church, allowing them to cultivate a large number of low-ranking bloodline warriors who were unable to ascend. Many of these bloodline warriors, in turn, became sorcerers and retainers of spellcasters. Ismail himself knew from the Church's secret historical texts that successive popes had continuously incorporated magical principles developed by spellcasters, improving the Church's ancient divine arts and enhancing their power. The flesh and blood body is merely a mortal object, the soul is the essential substance of life. The Lord's true gift to all things is the creation of the soul, not the strengthening of flesh and blood. You fail to truly understand the Lord's will as revealed in the sacred texts, leading to your foolish and impatience to waver in your faith. Cardinal Ismail, holding the scepter personally bestowed by the Pope, offered a series of questions and explanations, calming the confused bishops and presiding judges. The above is what His Holiness the Pope told me personally. Ladies and gentlemen, the most important thing right now is to face your true inner thoughts and reconstruct your interpretation and understanding of the Holy Scriptures. In each diocese under your charge, immediately arrange for priests and pastors to pass on His Holiness's will and quickly stabilize people's hearts. The Cardinal issued clear instructions in an orderly manner. The cardinals and presiding judges who received the instructions left one by one. After everyone had left, Ismail put away the papal scepter he had tightly grasped, slowly turned around and returned to the small prayer room. "I have done my best to comfort the bishops and presiding judges and stabilize their emotions. Your Holiness, Pope Zidai was still wearing the gray robes common to low-level priests. He leaned over a stone platform with several burning copper lamps and prayed softly. His body was hunched and his hair and beard were pale. He looked like an ordinary believer who had died of old age. Don't worry too much about this, Ismail. The issue you really need to focus on right now is the corruption of believers in the evil Moon Mountains and the summoning of high-level demons. Compared to the temptations and provocations of the Union spellcasters, those ancient demons who feed on mortal desires are the real threat that can shake the faith of believers and erode our authority. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.